The meeting will now come to order. We'll begin with introduction of members and seating of alternates, and we'll begin with town staff.
Dawn Guy, Recording Secretary.
Dan Beret, Town Planner.
Carrie Olson, Town Attorney.
Okay, and no other town staff. For commission members, we'll begin introductions starting on my far left.
Tom Bransfield.
Victoria Chetchet.
Bob Ellsworth.
Chantal Foster.
Jennifer Talone.
Robert Taylor.
Carolyn Freeman.
Joe Spada.
Okay, we will not be seating any alternates tonight. So first item is our agenda. We have a minor change to the agenda. It's a sequencing thing. We would like to move the discussion for application 23-09, which is 850 Cobalt Road. We'd like to move that to the beginning of the meeting. We will do that, and then we'll follow that up with application 2312 and then 2315. So unless there are any objections, may I have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
And a
Seconded.
second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Okay, the amended agenda is accepted. Just a quick note about meeting procedures. Due to the anticipated number of people who will most likely speak tonight, we'd like to start with limiting public comment to 5 minutes per person per session. That doesn't mean that you can't speak for longer than that, but we would just ask that you end your comments after 5 minutes, have a seat, let someone else speak, and then when no one new is asked to speak, you'll be asked to come up and speak further. We will not be having a sign-up sheet. We'll just do it kind of by a show of hands, I guess. Hopefully that'll work, okay? So we'll move on then to this would be the regular meeting. This is not a public hearing, so it's application 23-09, 850 Portland Cobalt Road, request for site plan review for a proposed retail fueling station and convenience store with drive-through, application of Janot LLC, and property of MJS Realty Venture LLC, map 31, lot 23-2, zone B-2. Would someone like to make a presentation regarding this application? Okay.
Where's a good spot to set up? You guys usually.
Let's
Maybe right over here. Okay.
And for our records, if you would, please state your name and.
Oh, yes, we also need you to stay at the podium.
Oh, sure.
We should be able to get that up.
I can see it.
Can you see it on the TV over there?
Can they see it over there?
Well, because it's on the TV. over
It's right there also.
Okay.
So, but,
Okay. My name is Kyle Haber. I'm from CLA Engineers. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Janet LLC. The proposal before you is for a retail fueling station, a gas station, with an associated convenience store. The property is located at 850 Portland Cobalt Road, it's Route 66. It is just west of the intersection with Gospel Avenue. The property is about 2.33 acres in total, entirely fronting on Route 66. It's bounded to the east by a commercial, small retail commercial development, to Dunkin' Donuts and some small retail shops in the building next door to the east. To the west is the Superior Precast Concrete facility. And this is a wooded lot that's right in between those two parcels. Like I said, it's currently undeveloped, it's woodlands. It had been disturbed in the past. When we explored the site, there was some evidence of some piles and some disturbed areas on the site. It's located in the general business B2 zone. And this is a permitted use for the site plan approval. The proposal, let me show you. This is from the site plan. The proposal is for a 4,960 square foot convenience store with drive-through. The drive-through will be free for coffee and donuts. Nothing is cooked on site. Everything is brought to the facility for sale only. In front of the building will be 5 fuel dispensing islands. That'll be between the building and Route 66 on that frontage. The development does meet the town zoning bulk requirements and the market regulations. There is an inland wetland system that runs along the east side of the property. That system's an intermittent water course. It's primarily a conveyance of stormwater from Route 66 and also the commercial development to the east discharges to that. It flows south to north to a head wall where it's captured in a culvert system that runs off-site. The Inland Wetland Commission did approve the project at the January meeting. The proposed building, like I said, is kind of located centrally to the site. The fuel islands between the building and Route 66 will be located on concrete pads. They'll be on raised pads surrounded by a concrete pad as well. It will have a canopy above sheltering the fuel islands from the weather. Loading for the site will be behind the building, and there's also a dumpster enclosure to the rear back right corner of the building. That will be a solid PVC fenced enclosure, so it will be screened, the dumpsters will be screened from the view. The development will be served by on-site septic and a well. Chatham Health has reviewed the plans and approved the plans. Also, the Connecticut Department of Health has reviewed the well location and has approved the location for the proposed well. HVAC equipment for the building will be stored behind the building, ground mounted behind the building. Stormwater from the site the roof systems will discharge to underground chambers. There'll be infiltration chambers. Prior to the discharge, there'll be hydrodynamic separators filtering the stormwater from the roofs and the canopy to the fuel islands before discharge to the underground systems. The underground systems and part of the front parking lot will all overflow to a stormwater basin that will be located to the east of the parking lot, the green area shown on the plans there, greenish blue area. That basin is sized to mitigate peak stormwater flow rates from the site. It's also designed to store the water quality volume in accordance with the town and DEP requirements. The project overall reduces the peak stormwater flows from the site, and does meet all of the stormwater requirements of PEEP in the town. During construction, we've provided a construction sequence for a contractor to follow. We've also prepared a site preparation plan that includes erosion and sedimentation control measures. The site will be surrounded by silt fence to protect the wetlands during the surrounding area during construction. The stormwater basin will also be used as a temporary sediment trap to capture and filter any runoff during construction. An anti-tracking pad will be installed at the exit from the site to try and stop sediment from reaching the state highway. There's also a pollution prevention plan included on the plan set for during construction and post-construction that includes maintenance and operation requirements for the erosion and sedimentation control measures and the stormwater system on the site. With that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to.
Do you have a rendering of an elevation?
We have a front elevation here.
We didn't get that in our packet here.
Okay.
sent it out, the first iteration.
Earlier, yeah.
Oh, so that hasn't changed?
I don't believe so.
Oh,
No, that hasn't changed, but did you get I know I saw a memo from Jeff, like an updated memo. I have the first one from a long time ago, but
Yeah, Jeff did do an updated memo beginning of May in response.
Okay, and I didn't print it
I
out.
can,
I think I have an extra one of those.
yeah, I can pull you the file copy if you'd like.
Thought we had one from him.
We do.
I think I emailed that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the rendering.
Correct, that is the front elevation. The owner of this gas station, the Best Way stations, there's a number of them around the area and around the state, and they've kind of standardized to a style of building that they like.
Excuse me, this is the first time on the meeting. Can I ask a question?
No.
There will be an opportunity.
Let's see.
I think Jeff did say something in the latest memo about the drainage, right? Speak to that right now. It's in response, I guess it was his second letter.
Yeah, he does have some comments. I did make a condition of approval to leave all comments and conditions of Jeff's memos, of the health department memo, as well as the fire department.
And we did address his comments. I believe he didn't have a copy of the stormwater report that had been updated, but we had addressed all his comments in there, and we'd be happy to make that a condition of approval that we address those comments.
Okay, and there was something about the drive-through, about the queue.
He did note the amount of stacking for the queue for the drive-through. We do meet the town requirements. We do have more than enough stacking, for that drive-through. And the owner is more than satisfied with the amount of stacking in that queue, for the drive-through.
I think he suggested that you use that for employee parking.
Correct. There are 3 parking spaces to the east side of the building, that if the queue does happen to back up to 9 or 10 cars, they may have difficulty backing up. We would be happy to make those employee parking spaces so that people won't be coming and going as part of that operation.
I can write that in as a condition if the board desires.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
And this changed considerably the entryway. There's no connection anymore.
That is correct. The original proposal, the owner of this property was trying to work out an interconnection between this property and the adjacent retail facility. Unfortunately, with negotiations, they fell through, and we removed that connection. Yeah, I agree, it is.
And is there some kind of I think I asked this the last time, along the area where the east side of the building, where the green shading is, it's not up there anymore, but.
I can flip it back.
There's a substantial drop off in elevation along there.
Along this back corner in here.
The whole side.
Yeah,
Back
yeah,
through here?
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So what's there? Like,
The-
is that what was there? Is it a fence? Is it a?
That's retaining wall. There will be retaining wall with fence atop the retaining wall. And this is the water quality basin right below it here.
Okay, so, there is a fence to prevent people from going.
Correct, yes.
I see, okay.
Those are plantings that you've indicated?
Yes, they are.
But it looks like you're planning to leave, are you gonna be leaving all of the
Yes, the perimeter will be left as wooded as it is, yes. Along the perimeter of that intermittent water course, along this side here, will all be left as is. And we've infilled with some red maples along that kind of wetland edge area.
Yeah, I don't remember looking at, is there a planting scheme or?
Yes, there is. I believe sheet 7 or 8 has.
Seven.
Thank you.
7.
Oh, yeah.
Sheet
7, yeah.
And I think you widened, didn't you widen one side of the,
Yes, we did widen the traffic lanes.
yeah.
The fire marshal had requested a wider traffic lane around the building that we did accommodate that.
Did that used to be an old gas station? It has bollards in the,
What's actually there is the neighbor's well, is what's in front of this property.
Oh.
If you look, coming right here, there's a gravel pull-off, a pretty
Yeah.
substantial gravel pull-off. So there's a bunch of bollards right in this area here, which is actually the well that serves the neighboring property. There's an easement over this property
Oh.
for it. And there's actually an abandoned well not far from that also, that will be properly abandoned as part of this project.
And the functioning well will remain.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yes, the existing functioning well for the neighbor will remain, and then for this development, a new well will be drilled for their use.
Okay. Any
So
further-
are there 2 wells to be abandoned? They show one in the middle of the wetland.
That is an old dug well that's in the wetlands. It's just got a well cover over it, so we're not venturing into the wetlands to abandon that. That will just stay in place. And the health department was okay with that.
this is a curiosity question. You said that there's no food that's going to be cooked on the premises.
Correct.
But what does coffee count as? Do you have coffee?
There is coffee that will be made on site, yes.
So that doesn't count for?
It doesn't count as actual food preparation, it's drinks.
Just
That's
curious. Okay.
Yes. They do bring stuff in, and I believe things are made off-site and occasionally reheated at the property, but
Okay.
nothing's actually cooked at the, made, I should say.
Yeah.
Yes, it's trucked in.
So it was my understanding that part of the problem with Dairy Queen being in the same plaza with the Dunkin' Donuts was a water issue. And so their well, they have their well for that plaza on this property.
Correct,
And then you're adding another well.
correct,
And you're gonna be making coffee in the early morning hours as well.
correct. And, sorry, not to
No,
cut you off,
that's
sorry,
okay.
but no, it's
Go ahead.
as part of the approval process through the Department of Health, they'll have to do well drawdown tests and make sure that this well doesn't have any interaction or detriment to the neighbor.
Or
to the
impact
other-
on-
Exactly, yes, yeah. Yeah, that's part of the Department of Health approval process.
Okay, thank
So
you.
they'll have to draw down and do testing for that.
Good question. Other questions or comments from commission members? Should we allow public, it's not a public hearing, but
If somebody wants to
it's
ask
okay.
a question.
Did you want to ask a
Just a
question?
quick question, has there been any study done on the traffic?
Oh, sorry, excuse me, you just have to go up the podium, say your name, your address.
Oh, sorry.
Because nobody can hear you on the live stream.
I got you. I didn't put my makeup on, but. My name is Robert Chelzik, and I live at 226 Isinglass Hill Road. Just a general question about impact on the traffic. Because you got a stoplight right before that. then you got a Dunkin' Donuts in and out. How's that gonna affect?
That's correct.
You gotta switch back to the other
Sorry.
guy. Sorry.
Oh, yours.
You got it, yeah. Sorry.
That's all right.
The-
You dive into it.
Based on the daily traffic on Route 66 and where the light is, there is no negative impact to the traffic on Route 66. The additional traffic from this site is negligible based on the amount of traffic on Route 66 now. And where we're exiting the sight line to the traffic light, and also further up the curve on Route 66 is more than adequate and meets all of DOT requirements. It is a DOT road, and they did review the entrances and the traffic impact, and they were satisfied with the development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Now, Dan, you said you prepared a motion to approve with conditions that all the comments in town engineer's memo, fire marshal, and Chatham are met? Is that a true statement?
Yeah, that's correct. It's Town Engineer's Memo, Chatham Health District, Fire Marshal, which I think he addressed everything but one thing. And then also the CT State Department of Health. I added that as well, since it's a public water supply and they're in control over the well approval.
Ben Serb, West Cotton Hill Road. I actually own the wetlands that you're going to be eventually draining in. There's one property between us. What's the regulation like? I'm sure you have the answer. That's why I'm pretty confident you'll get this. How do we make sure I'm not going to get contaminants from the gas station itself? I think you mentioned something. Could you just elaborate? Because I may want that as, what I'm getting at is, I don't know how often it's required to be tested, state law. I'm going to want that as a condition added, that he needs to do it. We had another gas station in town that we did add that to, and they kind of weren't following it, but I want to make sure. So if you could just please tell me what that is, and then you're probably going to get my support, but I want to know your answer. I'll get out of the way.
Sure. As far as contaminants from stormwater, from the gas, yeah, right, in the gas station washing the stormwater and potentially polluting groundwater. The storm drainage system is filtered through hydrodynamic separators that function as oil water separators as well, so they trap the total suspended solids as well as oils in those hydrodynamic separators. It's also then further filtered through the water quality basin, which is a vegetated basin that functions to cleanse the water even further from total suspended solids. Also, the vegetation and the microbes in the vegetation break down any potential hydrocarbons that could run off or that could make it through. As part of the plan and as part of the stormwater management plan, and it's on the site plans as well, there are operations and maintenance requirements for those systems, both the hydrodynamic separators and for the water quality basin. The separators would be cleaned out twice a year and monitored for any sediments as well as any oil accumulation. The water quality basin also gets cleaned out twice a year if there are any litter or anything like that that ends up in there. The vegetation can grow very thick and gets to about 2 or 3 feet high from the mix of species that we plant in there. So it can be brush hogged once or twice a year to maintain and create healthy vegetation within that basin.
So who does that maintenance?
The owner will be required to.
Can we make that a condition?
I think it's part of their stormwater management.
Okay.
So,
Well, nobody ever does it.
so I am in favor of appropriate development. That sounds okay. All I would ask is if we could have a conditional approval after the 6 months, every 6 months, he give that report to the town. And that may already be a stipulation. If not, I want that a condition because we ran into trouble with another gas station here in town that they weren't doing it on time. I don't know what the process is, but I would like it a condition that they have to give us that report every 6 months. Other than that, I speak in favor.
So
Thank you.
there's one difference between this gas station and that
I
gas
know the
station?
difference.
Yes, I know, but I'm just explaining it. That gas station that he's referring to is in the aquifer protection zone. So that's why that had I think, a higher level of reporting requirement than the other 7 or 8 gas stations we have in town.
Well, I have an identified wetland, and I will be receiving this. and I'm just-
I understand that. I'm simply answering a question.
Thank you, Dan. So if the board would consider adding that as a condition, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you. And I'm speaking in favor of it after that. Thank you.
So just for my information, who would it have been inland wetlands that reviewed this in detail?
Yeah, inland wetlands review this and approve this.
And who oversees the every 6-month testing and is that?
It's.
Water department? or-
It's not anyone in the town. No one from the town goes and makes sure that they're doing that every 6 months. I know at the other gas station, that's something that we monitor more closely because it's in the aquifer protection area.
So who does that get reported to then?
On the
Testing
aquifer protect.
results. The testing results.
In this case?
Would get sent to us?
Oh, it would get sent to the land use department, and I guess we would just file it.
Well, if there was a violation, your wetlands enforcement officer would have the authority to enforce it.
Right, and I guess, as part of their stormwater management plan that they're submitting to you guys in the commission, we could enforce that, from a zoning enforcement matter as well. So if you would like those reports sent to the town, we certainly can receive them. I will say, when staff transitions, I imagine that will get lost, to be honest with you.
Okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, so we certainly can require it, but I would be surprised if in the transition that gets picked up from a staff member to staff member unless we're lucky enough to have a lot of overlap for training.
I would assume the wetlands permit is conditioned upon complying with their stormwater management plan, and perhaps the applicant can address that. I think they have an obligation under their wetlands permit to do that.
That is correct. That was part of the wetlands application, that the exact same operations and maintenance of the stormwater system were part of the wetland approval. So the applicant, the owner of the property, would be required to follow those procedures for the operations and maintenance.
So the only thing that is suggesting being additional to that is to report that finding to the town. That's,
Yes.
Right.
Just making sure.
What has happened and what some other towns have done is they've required every 6 months a maintenance log of what's been done on the property that the owner would submit to typically the land use agency or
Yep.
yeah.
Maintenance law.
So, yeah, just so for clarification, as a condition, the applicant will be required to submit a report of the maintenance log every 6 months.
That's absolutely, that would be totally fine, yes.
Okay, further questions? Okay, we're good. And as soon as Dan is done writing, would you like to read the motion? Sure.
Under pressure.
No, it was the hydrodynamic separator and then the basin, right?
Correct, yeah, the water quality basin, yeah.
Sorry, I gotta copy them down again.
Yep, that's fine. You got all night.
No, we don't.
Well, I guess, no, I
I
can't
was
do it.
gonna say, you can't copy that after.
I guess I can do it that way.
Victoria
Where do you want me
volunteered.
to start?
get through all the exhibits.
To approve application 23-09, 850 Portland Cobalt Road, request for site plan review for a proposed retail fueling station and convenience store with drive-through. Application of Jeanette LLC and property of MJS Realty Venture LLC, map 31, lot 23-2, zone B2. Okay. Where should I start here, Dan?
Oh, just at the
Conditions.
Not seeing it.
and based on.
Okay. And based on information submitted, testimony presented during hearing, and subject to the following instructions and conditions integral to this application. 1, that the applicant complies and addresses any comments or conditions from the town engineer's memo dated 5/10/24. 2, that the applicant complies and addresses any comments or conditions from the Chatham Health District memo dated 5/15/24. Number 3, that the applicant complies and addresses any comments or conditions from the fire marshal memo dated 5/7/24. 4, that the applicant complies and addresses any comments or conditions from the Connecticut State Department of Health's letter from 5/3/24. Number 5, that the certified letter of approval be placed on the site plan and that a Mylar and 3 paper copies of the plans be submitted. After endorsement, the Mylars must be filed in the land records within 180 days per ZR section 10.5.3.2.a. These requirements must be met prior to the issuance of a zoning permit. Number 6, that a zoning permit application be submitted in accordance with ZR section 11.1.1.a to ensure compliance with this approval. Number 7, that any exterior light fixtures must comply with ZR section 8.3 and must be approved by the zoning enforcement officer prior to installation. Number 8, that all proposed improvements associated with this application are to be completed according to the approved plan prior to the issuance of the required certificate of zoning compliance to operate businesses at this location, or a performance bond will be required in accordance with ZR section 11.2.2. Number 9, any proposed signage shall meet ZR section 8.4. Number 10, that this approval will expire in 5 years. Number 11, that the 3 parking spots east of building abutting the drive-through be employee parking. Number 12, as a condition of approval, applicant will be required to submit the maintenance logs for the hydrodynamic separator and water quality basin. Reasons, the proposal conforms to section 5 and 10.5 of the zoning regulations.
May I have a second to the motion?
Seconded.
Okay, we will now vote. We will begin with Victoria,
Aye.
Chantel,
Aye.
Jen,
Aye.
Rob.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Any opposed? There would be none, so the application is approved.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Okay. Okay, then we'll now move on to our public hearing. And the first application is 23-12, 220 Isinglass Hill Road. Request for a special permit for construction of an 8-bedroom residential care home. Application of Earlville Place LLC and property of Sean McGrail Revocable Trust. Map 129, Lot 9, Zone RR. May I have a motion to open the public hearing, please?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, the public hearing, yes.
I'm going to be recusing myself from this.
Okay,
And our attorney suggested that I leave the room
Okay.
while doing so.
okay. We will summon you when
Downstairs.
we are done.
Just how,
I'll come get you.
okay.
Okay, we'll need to seat someone for Victoria, so Tom, would you be seated? for
Sorry,
Victoria?
sorry.
Wider than that.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to open the public hearing then for application 2312? And a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Okay, the public hearing for Application 23-12 is now open. Would someone like to speak on behalf of this application? And if you would, approach the podium. Approach the podium, identify yourself, please, and state your name and address.
Good evening, I'm George Law, 595 Main Street, Portland, Connecticut. I'm representing the applicant for this application, 23-12, which, as we heard, is for a special permit to have a residential care home at 220 Isinglass Hill Road, which is a permitted use by special permit in an RR zone pursuant to the permitted use table in section 4.1 of our zoning regulations. The applicant of this project is Oroville Place LLC. It's a limited liability company, the members of whom are Joseph Janjica and Courtney Janjica. Mr. and Mrs. Janjica are present tonight. And Mrs. Janjica is going to provide a brief presentation following by which Pat Benjamin, the civil engineer, Matt Pegolo, the building architect and designer, and Thomas Graceffa, the landscape architect, will present the site plan as well as the design of the home and the grounds of the property. Just briefly before we begin, the application is for an 8-bedroom residential care home, a state-of-the-art facility designed to look like the homes in the neighborhood, the other homes in the neighborhood. The residential care facility will be licensed by the Connecticut Department of Health. The facility is for senior residents who are independent but choose to not live independently or cannot live independently, providing yet another opportunity for Portland senior community to remain in town, another living option for them. Facility will be staffed by one administrator 24/7. The administrator will park, as will the vehicle, the house vehicle, if you will, in 2 bays of a 3-car garage, so there'll be an additional parking spot in that garage. The residents are not allowed to have vehicles at the property. The property, as you'll see, will be professionally landscaped and buffered and professionally maintained to keep it in harmony with the neighborhood. So at this point, I'm going to ask Mrs. Janjica to come up and present her presentation, followed by the other individuals I indicated, and then following which we'll entertain any questions or concerns people may have.
Thank you, and good evening, neighbors and advocates for what we are proposing. I'm Courtney Janjica, and I am one of the applicants. My husband, Joe, is over here, and we did have a presentation we can put up here. I'm the passion behind the project. 2 years ago, my 88-year-old grandma became a widow, and she wanted to live in a family environment in one of these residential care homes. She is waitlisted on 5 different residential care home waitlists. 2 years later, she remains on those waitlists. There's just no openings. So the style of living, and I don't know if we can put the presentation up, thank you so much. This style of living promotes companionship, it promotes assistance with activities of daily living, but still allows the residents to get up every day, come to the family room, enjoy activities, garden, if you will, if that is their capability. So next slide. We brought a team together to bring this to life and to bring this to Portland. Our team is George Law, the attorney, myself, and Joseph. I'm the owner-operator. I see myself as operationalizing this on a daily basis, and the neighborly one. Pat Benjamin, our land surveyor, who will speak in a moment, Matthew Pegolo, the building architect and designer, and Thomas Graceffa, landscape architect. So let's talk about, on the next slide, what are we proposing? We're proposing a home which we are adopting our extended family, 8 seniors that will live in this home, and call this their residence. This is not a nursing home. I want to emphasize that. And it'll be a beautiful home just like the neighbors' homes. We're seeking to obtain the special permit, as George shared, to operationalize this under the law. And we are not seeking any zoning changes. This complies with the current zoning and or tax abatements. We will be taxpayers. This home will have 8 bedrooms, single occupants, a 3-car garage, an elevator for those that need that capability, recreation room, and will be meticulously maintained and oversight by the state. So what is an RCH? On the next slide, the definition: a home with necessary personnel to, if needed, furnish food, shelter, and laundry for 2 or more people. We're providing these services, do not require training of a skilled licensed nurse. In addition to that, on the next slide, this is a craftsman home locally designed by Matt, and we'll have local builders. This home will look and feel like others in the neighborhoods, be well manicured, and we'll have trees for privacy, and to promote privacy for our residents and extended family and the neighbors. The residents are independent seniors. They do not have private vehicles. They will still want to use the local restaurants, the spa, but they do not want the responsibilities of day-to-day tasks within the home. And that's what the overseer, the caretaker, is there for. Additionally, continued on the next slide, this home will have a 24-hour caretaker, if you will, extension of our family. I will be there as the owner-operator. This is a home where mom and dad would live, my grandma will live, and a place where I would want to live. And unfortunately, there's just not enough senior housing options. These homes became popular during COVID because many seniors were isolated inside the larger care homes, and the disease of COVID-19 was spreading. So they found that these smaller homes could give more attentive care, 1-on-8 caretaker. This home is state licensed and regulated by the state, and we expect no more traffic than a modest home with maybe 2 teenagers, and it would be great to have 8 grandparent-like folks living across the street. In addition to that, I'd like to share what this home is not, just to clear up any confusion. That's the next slide. It's not a medical institution. It's not for memory care residents. It does not cater to people with complex and highly demanding health needs, including mental health needs. The residents are actually screened by a skilled nurse before they come in, and we are under obligation as owner-operator to make sure they fit within our facility. And the residents, if they have to be transferred within a certain period because we cannot care for them, we actually get fined for that. Not a home where someone will come to get medical treatments. It's not a drug or alcohol rehabilitation center, and it's not a temporary housing facility, as I stated with the vacancy. I personally am excited. You can tell I'm passionate about this project to bring this type of living for seniors to the town of Portland. And I believe this promotes better living. There is a model of this in Marlboro by the River, LLC. And it actually promotes longevity for seniors and better health. They're living on average 2 years longer. These residents will still want to go to their favorite restaurant they used to go to the spa, have us take them to CVS, whatever that looks like, and it will retain seniors in this town. So I thank you for hearing me, the applicant, and the passion behind the project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Pat, our land surveyor.
If you'd like. Sure. We can try to do that.
I just want to be able to point, so if you can leave it right there. Okay, perfect. For the record, my name's Pat Benjamin. I'm a civil engineer and land surveyor. My office is located 360B Main Street in Durham. We were hired to do the land surveying for the property, which had already been surveyed as part of a subdivision in 2019. We were also doing the site development plan. On top is a copy of the site development plan at 1 inch equals 20 feet. I put the landscaping plan at the bottom only because I really didn't want to recolor it because he had done such a great job. And I just want to run through the elements of the site. We looked at the original 2019 subdivision plan that was approved by the commission. And we kept the house, the septic, and the underground galleries for roof water in almost the exact same position as what was approved back then. It's 1.81 acres. Isinglass Hill is located here. Common driveway is located right here. This is the boundary of the property.
For one
Goes back to Isinglass Hill. The proposed dwelling is located in the middle.
What?
There's a driveway cut that's going to run down to the garage. The garage is about 4 or 5 feet lower than the existing road. The roof water for the building is discharged to an underground gallery system. That gallery system is 48 linear feet of 24-inch concrete galleries, and there's a foot of 1.25 stone all the way around those galleries. The septic system was sized for 8 bedrooms. It's located right here. It was approved by the Chatham Health District. We have a 2,000-gallon septic tank. And just to make sure there was no issue with the building itself, we also added an oil water separator. Typically, we use for a restaurant. I've done several of these kinds of facilities. We usually never add that because we've never had an issue. The footing drain discharge is also underground. It's located at the corner in the front of the lot. It is 32 linear feet of 12-inch galleries. If the footing drain runs, we're required to have, by the building code, you're required to have a dry basement, so we always make sure a footing drain is installed. The plan shows the limits of clearing on the drawing. We also have all disturbed areas surrounded by silt fence. The topsoil stockpile is located in the front of the property. When we go out to flag the limits of clearing, we actually stake the building we actually stake everything that's going to be built, and then we calculate where the limits are, and then we walk out and flag every tree on the perimeter to remain. There is an extensive landscaping plan for the property. There's 3 parking spaces, or 6 parking spaces, as we discussed. There's 3 in the garage, there's 2 out front, and 1 off to the side. Although the number 6 isn't labeled as a handicap spot, it does meet the handicap requirements. It's 16 feet wide, and it has less than a 2% slope. This plan does meet all of the coverage requirements. It meets the proposed building setbacks. It was approved by the Health District. I did get a review from Jacobson, and I revised the plans middle of last week. I turned those back in. There was only one question that he had was, your regulations don't have a parking calculation for assisted living. You have public housing, which is apartments for seniors, where you have a vehicle, which is 1 space per bedroom, and then you have a medical institution. And typically in the towns we work in, they have 1 slot for assisted living, and it's 1 space per 3 bedrooms. So that's the way we looked at this. And that's
So, Pat, how many parking spaces are there?
6.
Okay.
Yeah, and the residents don't have vehicles.
And one that.
One is a handicap spot. It's not labeled that way, but it meets the criteria.
So when these people have visitors, where do they park?
There'll be all these spaces up front.
Okay.
There's 3 spaces right here, and there's an extra one in the garage. I've worked on several assisted living facilities, many hospitals, many medical facilities. I've looked at the trip generation tables, which are required if you do a traffic study. For an 8-bedroom assisted living with a car, the number of trips generated are 10 trips in and 10 trips out in a day. And a typical 4 or 5 bedroom home is almost identical. It can be it can be higher than that. So it basically is the same as a residential home. I also have a father-in-law who's in an assisted living facility, the Commonwealth in Haddam. I've spent, I don't know how many hours on his deck, and I think there's about 130 bedrooms in that facility, and I see 1 car about maybe every 10 minutes that's going in or out of the facility, so it's very low traffic.
Who have something still to add to the community.
Good evening, everyone. Is it good? Good evening. My name is Matthew Pegala with Pegark Architecture, located at 236 Main Street here in town. If you wouldn't mind pulling up the presentation again. And you can go to the next slide. And one more. And the next slide. All right, so this is the cover sheet of our presentation, essentially for the architectural set. I'm here to speak on the architecture of the building itself and in regards to what we've designed for this facility. We will be obviously following the 2022 CT State Building Code, as well as the Title 19 Public Health and Safety Code, as well as Section 1913 D6, Homes for the Aged. That would be a requirement, as mentioned earlier. You can go to the next slide. All right. So this home is 3 levels. We have a basement, first floor, and second floor, just like all those surrounding homes in the area. The building footprint, so if you were to walk around the building, what does the building encompass? It is 4,774 square feet, which is about 20% larger than all of the houses on this adjacent street. We're not terribly larger than the remaining houses, the existing 3 houses. The house immediately to the north was also my project. It's currently under construction. It's a new build. So when we were tasked with designing this project, we were tasked with not only trying to accommodate the program of the spaces that are required, also meeting all the state regulations, but also trying to include the modern farmhouse craftsman style with this program, given these constraints that we have with zoning regulations, with the neighbors, and with local areas. So we did as best as we could, given the constraints in terms of siding, trim, peaks, gables, and all of that, which you'll see in the next couple slides. So if you can go to the next slide. All right, so this is the first floor plan. On the first floor plan, you can see we have some of the units on the left. We have a small kitchen, which is going to have a residential kitchen feel. It'll have an island with some stools, and then we have the 3-car garage. The garage, again, is no bigger than the existing houses surrounding it, and we'll have a covered entry. We'll have building-mounted lighting to light the areas immediately at the entrances, as well as in front of the garage doors. And there will be no building signage mounted on the building, and there will be no freestanding signage in the yard or in the grass. So essentially, when you walk by this building as a neighbor, it just looks like a house. Like, there's nothing saying, we are a residential care facility. So in total, it has 8 bedrooms. It has a 3-car garage, the elevator, and the building will be fully sprinklered. That is one of the requirements to meet this use group. So it will be fully sprinklered with the elevator. You can go to the next slide. So this is the second floor plan. The space above the garage is not being utilized. And you can see the other remaining bedrooms, the elevator, and then like a recreational room where they might have a TV or some books, puzzles, and maybe do like a movie night or something like that up there as well on the far right. Can you go to the next slide, please? In terms of the architectural elevations, this is what the proposed structure would look like. On the top right, you can see a black and white 3D rendering showing what it would look like if you were in the driveway of the building. And then you have the flat 2D elevations. It is important to note that the maximum height of the building allowed in this area is 35 feet, and we are proposing 28'10". The maximum height is measured from the center of the average roof slope, from ridge to soffit, to the center of the average grade, high to low, per zoning regulations. Can you go to the next slide, please? So we put together a rough diagrammatic rendering of what the house could look like. We are going to be using like a slate blue type of vinyl siding, the white trim, black architectural shingles, and then the plantings that you see here are are close representation of what is on the architecture, the landscaping plan. This is standing at about the skirt of the driveway. And as mentioned, the garage is about 4 or 5 feet lower than the road. So the building height, it actually, it sits lower in the road. And then with the plants growing around it, it's kind of like off in the distance off the road. So it has some coverage there. If we can go to the next slide. And that's it in terms of architecture. The other thing that we did do per Jacobson's comments was, per zoning code, was provide the photometric calculations for the building mounted lighting, as well as the specs of what those lights would be. Again, there is no freestanding lighting, and the photometrics should be in your packet. I had sent that over. And that's all I have for architecture, so I will pass the mic over to Tom Graceffa.
Good evening. My name is Tom Graceffa. I'm a landscape architect out of Manchester, Connecticut, and been doing this for a few years. This is an interesting project and contains, could I just get the plan up there to begin with? Yes, and over here. You'll see on the eastern end of it is untouched forest. The two colors of ochre sort of just got tired of doing the edges, so that's all existing forest land that's going to stay in place. Anything that's on the western side that runs across the top of the site will stay in place as a groups of oaks and maples. Down in the lower left-hand corner, there are a significant amount of mature oaks which will stand in place. And as you looked at the rendering of the plants from the roadside, let's say, the entrance drive you see has a slight curve in it, and normally for a residential home we'll have types of trees and shrubs and perennials that are a single row deep and deal with looking at it against a house. In many of these areas, especially towards the northeast and all along the west side and most of the south side, we have delivery of 3 or 4 evergreens or deciduous plants, or both of those mixed together, that are significant in size, 3 rows deep. So it is there's spaces between plants, obviously, and so we're trying to do as much as we can to put the smaller, colorful material outside on the street view, and where the all the water and septic is located, that's staying bare. We're not planting any trees around those, of course, but up near the house, actually, it's very clean and open, and we're sort of hugging this house with this much plant material. And it's intentional, obviously. We have used 18 different varieties of woody plants here. 2 of those varieties are not native. All 16 of the other ones are native Connecticut material. The north part, as I said, is untouched and is really a mature forest that creates a great backdrop for anyone coming from the south. You're not seeing through that to this residence. And from the road, because of the curved driveway and the size of the material we're specifying, we will have some very good curtains covering most of the views into the property almost off the bat. So that was our goal. I knew that there was concern about vision to the site, and so we worked very hard on trying to put that together. I'll stop at this point and ask questions later. Thank you.
Thank you.
presentation. I'm happy to entertain any questions or bring our team back up to answer any questions that the commission members may have.
George, is this considered by the town or the state as a healthcare facility?
This is
By
considered,
license?
the application is considered a healthcare institution. And that, again, is a permitted use under the, permit tables in section 4.1 and defined in, our regulations in Article 2. As, an institution is considered a dwelling with units designed for a particular population that requires on-site staff shall be considered an institution. So it is considered a health institution, not a convalescent home or a hospital, because there's no medical care there.
And it is licensed with the state?
The State Department of Public
By
Health.
the Department of Health.
I'm just curious about
Maybe the last
the
sentence.
name. It was called
Oh,
a
something
residential
multifamily.
care home.
Correct.
Okay, that's just a new one on me, but that is a real thing?
That is a real
Okay.
thing. It's defined in Connecticut General Statute 19A490. Means a community residence that furnishes in single or multiple facilities food, shelter to 2 or more persons unrelated to the proprietor, and in addition provides services to meet a need beyond the basic provisions of food, shelter, and laundry.
Okay, and we're saying that that is, because I did look at this one when I was at home, when I was looking at my zones. Now I can't find it, but I did read it. It said, where is it? It did say. So what my question is, what category are we putting it under? Convalescent homes, hospitals, and healthcare institutions? Is that what we're-
Healthcare institutions.
That's where we're putting it?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. I have questions, but they really relate more to the actual services that are provided.
Okay.
And that kind of thing. Are you going to answer those, or?
Well, maybe if you ask the question, I think Mrs. Stranjika is going to have to come back up for that.
Okay. So I understand that none of the residents are allowed to have vehicles.
Correct.
And is there going to be some kind of a car service? I mean, what?
There will be a property vehicle, a luxury SUV, as I'm reading, for the property, which will be housed in the garage.
Okay.
And that will be used to
So that would be one of the
transport them.
things that's going to be in the garage?
Correct.
And the way I'm understanding this, these rooms, it's a bedroom and a bathroom, basically.
Correct.
Everything else is community living.
Yes.
Right. And so somebody's going to be cooking food for these people all the time?
Correct.
Okay, so it's more like, is this like independent living?
Absolutely. These people are required to be able to live independently. It's their choice not to live alone.
Right. I guess I'm just confused why it's not called independent living, but it's residential care.
Thank you for the question. Typically, someone going into these homes do want someone to take care of the daily tasks for them, and they might have a need for activities of daily living, such as maybe getting help assistance with dressing or showering, but not beyond that. And the convenience of the home, because it is a communal room, they could prepare their own meals within that. They could participate in the cooking, but often would prefer that to be taken care of for them, concierge service, if you will.
So
I'm sorry, the way I'm understanding this, though, is that kitchen that's there is the kitchen that's going to be used by somebody who is preparing the food for these people. In other words, you know, there's not a separate kitchen that, or there's not catering, or I don't know, maybe there is food that's being brought in from outside, or,
That is one of the options. We could bring in a meal planner, but we'd be overseen by the food administration on the meal prep. And for a residence with less than 19 people, the food can be prepared on site in a communal kitchen.
and one of the things that you said, you're selecting your people carefully because you have like a small group of people, and let's hope everybody gets along, right? But when you do that, what happens over time? I mean, these people are going to get older, so what happens? Like, what's the plan for?
Yeah, say someone goes to that's a great question. Say someone goes to the doctor and their care needs changed. We would work with the family to move them to the next level of care.
Okay, which is out of your place.
That's correct.
Okay, and then when you're doing that, what kind of I mean, do these people buy into this, or are they just paying a monthly rent, or how does that whole thing work? Like,
The cost is like a nurse, falls under that for the state. It's a daily cost, and that has not been determined yet. That's determined by the
okay, but
state
it's a
once
daily,
they view that.
It's a daily
Yes.
cost.
Yeah.
So.
Typically paid in 30-day increments.
Right.
Are you done with your question?
Yeah, well, for now.
So you have the luxury SUV. Is that used to take the people to medical appointments, or?
Yeah, it could be used to
How do
take them
they-
to a local restaurant, the spa, anywhere that they might need to go.
Okay,
Yeah.
so is that an additional staff person on site? Because you talked about just one staff and yourself is what I'm
Yeah.
understanding.
I could be the driver, or we could also have one on call.
So
Yeah.
you'll always have somebody there?
It would be kind of
In
by
addition-
appointment is the way that I see it. Yeah.
Okay.
They don't typically, I think the gentleman said, these folks love to be in their home, knitting, crocheting, building the puzzles, and then they plan their shopping
Right.
trips according to kind of what our availability would be.
So are the residents going to be going out and doing their own shopping, or is it going to be, you know, like, since you guys are going to be providing the food and cooking, are you going to have like a delivery service that provides like, you know, fresh fruit, like fresh ingredients every day, or how does that work?
Yeah. So the state regulation is that we keep 3 days worth of food on site. They could go out and get some of their own items, but one of the services we provide is to meet their needs. What snacks do you like? And that's part of the cost. Where I see them going shopping is to the local CVS, you know, a local restaurant, meeting a friend in town, that kind of thing for transportation.
Okay, so it would be like, are you doing the shopping, or is it a commercial service that's providing, like, you like put out an order and they provide it?
Stop and shop, and then just
trying to get an idea of
Yeah.
like what kind of, like, you know, traffic would be coming on a weekly, daily basis to there from, like, you know, like some type of service like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think, like I would go back to, no more than a modest home might have a landscaper come, grocery delivery service. These folks don't even necessarily like to order things on Amazon. They like to go down to the local store and pick it up themselves. I see myself as doing most of the inbound work for necessities.
But the bedrooms are just bedrooms. There's no refrigerator, there's no stove, no cooking apparatus in the bedrooms.
That's correct, yeah.
They come out to the common area to cook if they wanted to.
The goal of this type of facility is to get people up and active. What happens with the independent living that's truly behind closed doors in apartments, they truly end up staying there 22 hours of the day. They go out for the 1 or 2 activities that they like. This, promoting longevity, the thought is getting them up to the common areas every day, checking in eye to eye, you know, participating in the meals, and really catering to what they like rather than serving fish sticks, serving salmon that they actually will eat and thrive for health purposes.
Well, you have, I mean, you're gonna have 8 folks there. They're all gonna have families. What's the setup for visiting hours, or?
Yeah, so great question. Unfortunately, these folks don't get a lot of visitors. Post-COVID, people use FaceTime, all of those things. This is why this loneliness crisis exists. But I would say we have the 3, parking spaces. We would have guidelines for visitors, and we'd have a behavioral contract for visitors as well, but they would be welcome to have visitors on site. We have a consultant that we're working with to build those guidelines.
So no overnight visitor? Like if
No.
somebody came from out of town and...
There's no guest room.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
And is there any access, the main access is through that main entry door? Can you get into the units from any other way? Is that it?
No, just the hallway
Just
with
through
the
the
doors.
main
Yeah, and then
door.
the garage into the entrance and then the main entrance of the home.
Okay.
As well as a back door. And one of the state requirements is that you do put alarms on the doors so that if someone, does leave, because they need to check in and out with the caretaker on site.
So it's pretty much like living with a teenager, but at an older age.
Yes, a lot of grandma and grandpas.
Before I have a question, and it's regarding parking. So listening to you talk, I'm just kind of adding up things in my head. So I hear probably a cook on site, the administrator, which would be a couple of parking spaces there, maybe a driver who might have to have their own vehicle. So there I could see like 3 spots being taken up by these individuals. So I guess I'm questioning the parking availability for visitors or, delivery of prescriptions or food or.
Yeah, so myself as the owner operator, I'll be taking on a lot of those tasks. The caretaker will be the cook, honestly. And when the shift changes, if you will, there'd be a little bit of overlap there. The driver also likely me, as the owner operator. So it would be on demand. The vehicle could go back and forth between my personal residence and this residence as well. But a good question. We've toggled that in our head and been consulting about what a schedule would look like. Again, in the neighborly fashion to be least disruptive, both to the residents and the neighbors.
What about recreation? Will you be encouraging the people to venture out in the neighborhood to walk, and sightsee? And will there be like a recreational coordinator who might be on site to lead activities?
Yeah, so in the larger facilities, there is a coordinator. As the owner-operator, I am the coordinator. Most of these folks would like to enjoy puzzles, being on FaceTime, having assistants using the iPad. We would coordinate some activities. We'd like to go to local restaurants with this extended family. Exercise would be definitely something to promote health. Again, that would be based on our type of residents. They could check out, go for a walk, and come back with oversight, from the person on site. Does that answer your question? I think you had one other part.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
You did say that there's just one person, you're renting this to singles, or you're offering it to single people, so you could not have a couple staying in a bedroom.
That's a good question as well. And what we found is that the demand is for single rooms. The square footage would have to be 50 more square feet per room to accommodate 2.
Okay, so it's definitely.
Yeah, and then the model we're building after, there really was only one sibling set. It was sisters that ended up in a joint room. And so now they're building a second residence, only a single room. So that's what we were advised to do, based on demand.
So, I guess I have a question. What happens, you're the owner operator, what happens when you cannot own or operate this anymore? Like, is there somebody to make sure that the maintenance is done, people are taken care of, they're getting checked out, getting driven, getting all, everywhere? I mean, you're a pretty big liability to your own company.
I'll throw out, my husband got a big life insurance policy on me, just kidding. You do, so the state would help to transition the home under the same original profile for the persona of the residents, because they would want to maintain them in that home. But I would also say, like, what if another great question, what if the caretaker, isn't able to make it in, they're ill today, then you do have a caretaker, like, on-demand contract list that you work with.
You mentioned a number of things you're not as a healthcare facility, like a sober house or a rehab. Is there different licensing requirements for that, Georgia?
Very different,
In other
yes.
words, down the road, you couldn't just become a...
Yeah, for instance, like administering an IV is something we absolutely are prohibited from doing from a medication perspective. For alcohol and rehabilitation, like from jailing, that's a whole nother level of oversight and just not something we're trying to do here.
There's no skilled nursing care.
Right.
Yeah, or requirement of a nurse to be on site.
What about handicap accessibility? Is the building handicapped?
Yes, it is. I think Matthew kind of touched on this a little bit. So the footprint of the homes, like a little bit larger than the homes in the area.
Yeah.
They have to have 6 foot, I believe 6 foot hallways. The doors have to be wider. The elevator accommodates a wheelchair. For instance, yes, it's all ADA compliant. The showers.
And there's gonna be housekeeping and laundry, and you're gonna be busy. I mean, that's all part of the deal.
That's correct. I'm a friend to the elderly. My best friend's 80 years old, so.
It just seems like that's a lot of hats to wear,
Yeah,
for.
it is.
And
And those things can also, like, they can be outsourced. We've thought about just bringing the meals in, frozen, kind of depending on what, the residents will definitely have a say, because it's their home. If they wanted their laundry dry cleaned, we could take it out for them. Just another example. Any other questions for now?
Let's see, commission members, last call, well, not last call, but any more questions before we open it up to the public? Okay then, we'll now open this up for public questions or comments. Again, we ask you to limit yourself to 5 minutes at a time. So we have no sign-up sheet, so if we could, if someone would like to come up and be first to speak. Yes.
Could you just ask them to say their name and address for the record?
Oh, yeah.
And I'll do correct.
And if you would, when you get to the podium, please state your name and address for the record. That applies to everyone, not just this gentleman.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name is Michael Gann, and I live on 216 Isinglass Hill Road. And my property directly abuts the property where this project is going to be built on their western border. Courtney, I'm glad you're a friend of the elderly. I'm 77. Until tonight, I think you only knew me as a name on a map. So the only reason I'm up here is to introduce myself as your neighbor, fellow resident, fellow taxpayer, and just to be able to put a face to the name that you've seen on the map that's adjacent to the proposed property. I do have some concerns. My lawyer will be addressing all of those in detail But I did want to talk about a few personally that affect my personal health, well-being, as well as the environment around my house. The western edge of the proposed structure is very close to my property, around 25 feet, based on the measurements I did from the map. On the other side of the border, my house, the closest point to the border, is also 25 feet. So I'm concerned about the proximity. The structure's on a hill, and going up and down that hill, and by the way, I'm an engineer by education, so I'm not making stuff up. Going up and down the hill, I determined that the grade of the slope on the hill is between 25 and 45%. If you're a skier, that's kind of an expert slope. So anything coming down from that facility toward my house, whether it's water or sewage or fuel for a generator or fire suppression equipment, or God forbid a fire, debris from that, and any other thing you can imagine is all going to wind up on my property eventually, perhaps in my well, and perhaps further on down to the vernal pool that is part of the wetlands on the other side of my property. I'm concerned that the leach field is too close to my well. I walked that area. I took some pictures that I can give you of the proximity. And finally, I'm also concerned that because the property is mostly ledge, just about everybody that's built there has had to use quite a bit of dynamite to blast away ledge in order to make room for foundations and other development. I'm concerned that the explosions will upset the water table and thereby also cause damage to my well. I'm concerned that the explosions might affect my septic system, and I'm also concerned that it might affect the structure of my house. And I'll tell you why I'm really concerned is because when they built 230 Isinglass Hill Road, I was home when they started blasting without notifying me, by the way. I was home. There was damage done to my house. There was damage done to the items inside my house. This proposed facility is 10 times closer and 4 times bigger than the property I'm referring to. So I would respectfully request that the Planning and Zoning Commission address my personal concerns as well as all of the additional concerns that our legal team is going to be presenting. Thank you very much for hearing me out.
Someone else like to speak?
Good evening. My name's Louis George. I'm from the law firm of Hassett and George, and I represent Mr. Gans and Ryan Craffa as well with regard to this application. First, I'd like to say that the idea of adult living is not a bad idea. Most of what I'm going to talk about is it doesn't fit. And it doesn't fit for a number of different reasons. First reason, the regulations don't allow for this. It is not an as-of-right use, and is not a use permitted by special permit, as was discussed. And it was somewhat mentioned in terms of the definitions, but the table on 4.1 specifically states that it is either a convalescent home, hospital, or healthcare institution. This application is for a residential care home. The definition that they're going under is healthcare institution, and that is not, that definition does not allow for this type of use. So,
pause you right there. Have you read the general statutes that define what an institution is in this respect?
Yes,
Because
I have a letter.
anytime in our zoning regulations where a term is not defined, we defer to the general statutes for a definition. In this circumstance, residential care home does fall under this actual definition, so it is permitted by special permit.
I respectfully disagree. I have a letter here that lists out the definition. Healthcare institution is defined in your regulations, and the regulation, and the definition, and I have it here, I can pass these out if you want. This lists, what I did was to really figure this out, because it's been glossed over, is took every possible definition that this could fall under, and printed it out for your use, because I knew this would, it gets very confusing, but it is not a convalescent home. I think we agree to that, although some of their plans use a convalescent home in terms of parking, 1 to 3. It's not a convalescent home, and it's not a hospital, and it's not a healthcare institution as defined, which is a hospital, healthcare facility for the handicapped, mental health facility, alcoholic drug treatment facility, an infirmary operated by an educational institution for the care of students enrolled in faculty and employees, and hospitals operated by state agency in care and treatment of tuberculosis, mentally ill, any multifamily dwelling with units designed for a particular population that requires on-site staff. This is not a multifamily dwelling. So under the definition within the Portland regulations for a healthcare institution, this doesn't fall under it. And it's really important that the commission look at this because, as I said, it's a unique project, and without having it defined and having the requirements set forth in your regulations, the commission would really be guessing at what is appropriate under this special permit. Because under the special permit application, your job tonight is to determine whether this use, which may have some similarities to the RR zone, should fit in the RR zone. That's what a special permit is, and that's what you guys are tasked with doing, is to determine the uniqueness and see if it fits in. One, I don't think it is even defined, and when it's not defined, it is prohibited under 1.51 of your regulations. So I think the analysis really stops there. If you find that it somehow fits in as a special permit, then you're looking at whether this project has any negative effects on the neighborhood, properly fits within the neighborhood, safety, welfare, and the list is within the regulations, which I'm sure you know about. But the aspects of this neighborhood, let me just go to the special. So number one, our claim is it's not a permitted use. It's not a use allowed by special permit, as it's a residential care home, which has not been defined by these regulations, and it doesn't fit under the hospital or institution definition, healthcare institution definition. Just to look at the special permit and how your analysis would work, I'll go back to the beginning. This is a 4-lot residential subdivision with a private driveway, which is not even of code. It's 19.5 feet. The fire marshal said, well, we have a little leeway, it should be 20. So at a minimum, it is like right there. It's a narrow private road, no sidewalks. As you probably know, it's a very rural area, and there's 3 other homes. They share a driveway. They have the obligation to maintain the driveway, the cost of the driveway, to insure the driveway, and have liabilities for that driveway. You're now taking and I will say, when this was originally proposed, I don't believe anyone sitting on that commission at that time intended for a commercial use to be put in that lot. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't work. One of the, when you look at the special permit and what you're looking at, safety, you have a private road with young children. This is a commercial use. I understand they're trying to limit the amount of traffic that's going in there, but in all practicality, there's going to be a more intensive use than what was intended for that residential area. Deliveries will occur, trash, laundry. There's going to be more than one person working there if they're going to provide these services that they say they're going to provide. And literally, they have 3 parking spots. They have a garage, 3-car garage, but they have 3 parking spots outside. I find it not very likely that a visitor is going to go in the garage and the garage door shut. And if you have more than one staff person there, which it looks like you're going to have a driver, you're going to have a cook or someone, you're going to have the administrator, they're going to take up those garage spaces anyways. So you really have 3 spots outside. The regulation, and our engineer will talk about it, is really 1 bedroom, 1 parking space, which should be 8 parking spaces based on their application. But if you look at their site plan and you look at the floor plan that was shown earlier, it's a 9-bedroom, 11-bathroom facility. There's a staff quarters with its own bathroom that is not included in the 8-bedroom. So it's really a 9-bedroom. It's going to be 24 hours, so someone's sleeping there, and they need a place. So you're now talking a 9-bedroom facility with 9 full baths and then 2 lavatories.
I'm just going to pause you for
Yes.
1 moment, please. We do have our 5-minute.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Is there,
I hate to interrupt you, but we do want to make it fair to everyone, so are there other individuals who would like to speak? Okay.
May I yield my time to this gentleman? My time to speak, my 5 minutes?
We weren't yielding time, but if no one else has anything else to say, we certainly, okay.
I'd like him to continue.
This gentleman would like to say something.
And then you're welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Sorry, I got engrossed in.
Yep, I understand. Me too.
Good
I will
evening.
pay better
Good evening,
attention.
everybody. My name is Louis Zanette Jr. I'm not sure what our address will be because we're building a lot to the north of the proposed. My alarm's going off. I'm supposed to take my pills. There we go. So yeah, so we're building the lot to the north of the proposed facility. There's no way you can approve this tonight. By virtue of the fact there are so many TBDs in every answer I've heard from the proposed, I don't know how you could approve it. You don't understand how the business is going to be run. You don't know how it's going to operate. You don't know the level to which deliveries are going to occur. I heard there was a traffic study done, but it did not take into consideration the fact that there's no medical assistance on site. That translates to 911 calls on a regular basis. There's going to be commercial food deliveries, commercial laundry done. That's not in the traffic assessment. I'm glad you brought up the private road. We have, my wife and I have a 37% maintenance burden for that private road. When we bought the lot, we did not understand that there was a potential for commercial use of that road, which would accelerate the wear and tear on that road and my financial burden. I will be financially harmed by that facility moving in. I guess I would like to understand from the proposed, how many facilities do you currently run like this?
Oh, I'm sorry. So any questions that you have, direct them to the chair, and then the chair can.
I think one of you should ask that question. How many facilities do they run like this? Because the failure rate of these facilities is quite high. And now we're going to have a boat anchor of a house in that area with 9 bedrooms. There's no residential, single-family individual that's going to buy that house if that business fails. It's going to be a boat anchor.
I don't understand. I guess I would like to see further evidence that the septic and water usage analysis is done correctly in light of the fact that I've been hearing 8-bedroom, and we all know it's greater than that. It's 9.5 baths. So I'd like to see that analysis reworked. Also in light of the fact that there's a sprinkler system that's going to be drawing on the well. I don't know how that's going to happen. I'd like to understand more about that. I'm surprised none of you want to understand more about that as well. I guess the other thing that became very apparent to me was if there's one person taking care of 8 people, but they have the ability to be driven around, are they all going together, or if they go 3 at a time, who's watching the other 5? I don't understand how that's managed, especially by someone who has a full-time job. I don't understand how the facility would be run and operated, and I think you all should understand that before you decide to vote on this. How is the business going to be run? And why would you permit a commercial establishment on a private road? Thank you.
Would you like to respond to some of these questions?
Did you write down the question?
I think I got, yep, a good number of them. First one was, how many facilities like this do you run?
We do not we do not run a residential care home today.
Yep.
We will be applicants of the state, which we've sent a letter of intent and have the application in hand. We do run other residential apartment buildings that are well maintained, and so that's, my husband's the developer and I'm the idea generator and the friend to the elderly.
Okay, and then maybe one of the questions was kind of alluding to, and I think some of our questions kind of were headed in that direction, is, how is this business going to be run? You mentioned a lot of the responsibilities would fall under the administrator, but, some of the responsibilities might require that person to be off-site, driving residents somewhere, so who else,
Yeah.
might be?
Good question. Let's clarify that all now.
Okay.
So there would be a caretaker that's always available for the activities of daily living, the meal prep on site, always staying on site.
Okay.
The driver would be an on-call person or myself. And again, I would say you don't normally get to pick your neighbors or get a say in who moves into the home next to you. So my husband and I could very well be building this home and adopting 10 children, which would require the same septic tank, the same meal delivery, et cetera. We are going to operationalize this, and we are going to be a successful residential care home because we care about the elderly and we care about having this option available to them.
You said that you're going to be living on site, right, and providing the services, correct?
I will be the owner-operator. I have a 12-year-old at home, so I'm going to live with my 12-year-old. But the caretaker, the reason for the staff quarters is if there's a storm, right, they would stay overnight. And there does need to be overnight care there. So they would maybe study, and sit and watch the video, make sure no one needs assistance during the night. That's what a staff quarters is.
Could you comment on the topic of increased number of emergency medical calls? If there is no medical care on site and a relatively minor, medical situation were to occur, which I could see, the possibility happening.
I agree. So first, I know some EMTs, and they've never not been able to get to a victim, right? So they would be able to get there. I don't think with 8 residents, there would be, again, there's families with 3 children that live in the area and 2 adults. They might need the same level of EMT services as 8 residents that are seniors, with the medical screening up front, and then the obligation, if someone's medical needs change, to move them to that level of care. I don't see that, say there was 2 calls, just the scenario, in a month for a residence, then they probably do need to be moved to a different level of care. That's a great indication of that.
I just thought of another question. Can I ask it or not?
I think so.
Somebody mentioned if there's a storm, you said you have sprinklers in your facility. What kind of generator backup do you have?
Yeah, and the sprinklers, by the way, are for fire.
Right, I understand.
Not landscaping
Right, right.
sprinklers.
Yeah.
And then your question, yes, you need to have a full-fledged backup generator as
Okay.
part of the state requirements.
I think I got his questions. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for the questions. We know this won't proceed without opposition, and
Just another
certainly.
question. The sprinklers would be fed from your well?
The sprinklers are fed from the well water source in case of a fire only. We wouldn't
Mhm.
want them to go off there if there wasn't a fire, it would destroy
Right,
the building.
understood.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Back up some of that first.
Matthew Pegalo, Peg Architecture. Just to respond, piggyback off the sprinkler question, there will be cisterns in the building, so in the event of an emergency, a fire system, there is water held in the basement in these tanks for the sprinkler system. It would, over time, like during construction, before they're operational, it would slowly draw from the well until those are full. But it would, like in the event of a fire, it would not like suck the well dry. That's not how that system works. There's a cistern system, and the fire suppression system is there to provide a safety means of egress for all the residents to escape. So it wouldn't be a draw on the sprinkler system. The fire protection system would not be a draw on the well.
And that's a normal thing for
Correct.
sprinklers?
Yep. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak for the first time? Okay, seeing none, Mr. George, I presume you would like to speak again?
So, thank you. The area that I want to cover is the plan as submitted, and it was alluded to a little bit, is not complete, and I don't think it's sufficient enough for you to make these decisions. I don't think it really takes into account a number of the items that you have to consider. And I think that's partly because the uniqueness of this use, which is not allowed in the regulations, has no criteria for you to really determine if it fits in. But there are clearly items that are not really mentioned in terms of exactly how many visitors will be coming, because basically you have 3 parking spots. So you have a Thanksgiving, you have a holiday, a weekend, visitors are going to come. They can't limit the number of visitors, they can't schedule appointments, they can come and go as they please to see the residents. So there's no, it's a small driveway with 3 parking spots in a garage. And I just, there's no explanation for that. There's no further detail. Another area is lighting. There should be a lighting plan. This is a commercial building. There's no real lighting as to how it's going to be set up, how that will affect the neighbors. So there's a number of items that are yet to be, and as was mentioned, to be determined. And with this type of special permit request, those really have to be before you now. And if they're not, you don't have the data, the information to do an analysis as to whether it affects the neighborhood. And when you look at these items, you find that it does have an effect on the neighborhood. And if you looked at the criteria that a special permit requires you to view, you'll see that there are a number of things that aren't in here. Visitation policies, lighting I mentioned. This home, as nice as it looks, And if you take that and maybe put it somewhere else in town, it might be great. But as was mentioned, one of the questions that I had is, what happens if it doesn't work? This is their first one. As mentioned, it's their maiden voyage. What happens to that neighborhood if it doesn't work? Is there anyone in this room that's going to buy a 9-bedroom, 11-bath with a small kitchen on a ledge? No. And that by itself should tell you whether this fits into that area. It becomes a very difficult property to sell. It's too unique and it doesn't fit within this area. When you, on the outside, it might look okay, but on the inside, it's a completely different animal. And it's not whether you have 5 kids or 4 kids. This is a dorm, an 8-bedroom dorm, 9-bedroom dorm, really. And that doesn't belong in this area. We have, I gave you an appraisal report that shows that this type of facility in this location clearly has a detrimental effect on the values of the neighboring properties by, I think they said 15% in value without a doubt. Taking and increasing in this case because it is a private driveway, and it really deters someone from wanting to buy in this area with this commercial use using the exact same driveway. So if you went to buy the neighbor's house, if they're moving, this is a detriment. And the appraisal report talks about that, and his credentials are in there. He couldn't be here on short notice like this. The last piece, and we have our engineer here, Steve Trinkus, who will come up and go over a couple of the technical items with regard to the stormwater and some of the other aspects, drainage and the ledge. The last thing I will say is, as was mentioned by Mr. Gann, this is a sloped lot on ledge. The original approval had a much smaller septic and leaching field. This is much larger. And in fact, I think it has to go up. So I have 30 seconds. I'll let Steve come up and explain those to you. And I will just end by saying, although the project has admirable intentions, it doesn't belong here. And by putting it here or trying to fit it in here, you're opening up the town of Portland to precedent for this to go into other areas just like this and maybe somewhere near you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Trinkus. I'm a licensed professional engineer from Southbury, Connecticut. I've been licensed since 1988. And I was retained by the 2 neighbors to review the plans. We submitted a letter, but I'm just going to hit a couple points. One is the septic. In the applicant's design, they take 2 employees at 25 gallons a day for discharge. However, now you have a person staying there overnight. Their accommodation makes it the 9-bedroom. That changes the amount of leaching area that you have to have. It also changes the length of the system by about another 12 feet. Additionally, the testing that was done back in '03 and '08 is quite old. It wasn't done by the current engineering firm. It has been my experience doing residential development since the early '80s. That after about 6 or 7 years, particularly when the testing is done by somebody else besides me, that I want to go out and verify it, because doing a design, I become the engineer of record and I'm liable. So the southern end of the system, the approximate last southern 50 feet of it, there's no testing in that area. Based on the '03 and '08 testing, you know, the ledge moves around. There's shallow ledge, there's some deeper ledge, but in that southern end of the system, there's no test holes at all in the area of the system itself. There is one down gradient, but I've done enough test holes in my life to know that ledge is highly variable on sites. It can go up or down, and you know, you need to investigate it, because if it is less than 24 inches at that southern end, that area cannot be used under the health code. Another issue is Mr. Gann has a well that's a little over 1,000 feet in depth, has a yield of 7 gallons a minute, but the static head, i.e. the water surface in the well, is only about 8 feet below ground. He has a 1 horsepower pump. This came up in a similar situation down in Madison, and the state health department made the determination that if the pumping capacity of the pump itself, not the yield of the well, that has nothing to do with it, is more than 10 gallons a minute, the setback to a septic system doubles from 75 feet to 150 foot, which would pretty much eliminate the septic system on this lot. So I think it is incumbent on the Chatham Health District to contact Mr. Gans and determine how deep in his well is the pump. With the water being roughly 8 foot below grade, you don't have to have the pump 1,000 foot down, because you've got plenty of capacity within the well itself. Obviously, if it's very deep, the pumping capacity would be less, but in the area of 200 feet below ground, the pump has a capacity of 20 to 60 gallons a minute, which obviously is greater than 10. And if that's the capacity of the pump, the setback to the septic system doubles from the 75 feet. The other two other major issues is the dumpster is located on the north side of the driveway. There's no connection to the driveway, so is the garbage truck going to park in the driveway? And then how do you get these rollable dumpsters off a concrete pad across the lawn to your truck? They don't roll very well. They're not on rubber tires, they're on metal tires, and they really don't roll at all. So that's a question. The garbage truck would wind up blocking the access to the site. Another issue is emergency vehicles. You know, yes, you have a sprinkler system, but you know, you may need, you know, fire trucks or other trucks. You've got to come down an access way and then a driveway. These trucks don't have very quick, I should say, sharp turning radii. They need to make sweeping turns, so they may not be able to get into the site. Regarding the sprinkler system, the sprinkler systems typically are what they call wet systems. They are full of water all the time, so that when a fire occurs, obviously the water's there. Therefore, your cisterns downstairs also need to be pressurized so that the sprinkler lines are full of water. You just can't have basically a tank there, and when the sprinkler calls, it's pumping water up there. They've got to be under pressure, because that's the idea, that the sprinkler throws a bunch of water out, knocks the fire down so it doesn't spread to other places. But if there's a delay in that, the fire can really get going. On stormwater, we heard the engineer state that basically the roof drains are going into a 24-inch gallery, the footing drains to a 12-inch gallery. As there's no outlet structures to these, it would be my experience that the engineer thinks they're going to infiltrate, except there's no test pit data in either case, and there's no infiltration testing to know, A, whether the soils will infiltrate the water. If it doesn't, in both cases, that water is going to go to the, let's see, west towards Mr. Gans's property. According to the calculations on the map, it's for 1 inch of rain for the roof drains. As we all know, we're getting more short duration, high intensity storms. If you get 3 inches of rain over a 4,000 square foot roof, that's a lot of water, and that's going to take the system and pretty much blow it apart. So these need to be designed, they need to be modeled to show with an outlet structure that you are going to, you know, infiltrate, or you're going to have a controlled overflow. The town's regulations do allow this commission to require a more detailed stormwater management plan, but one has not been provided. Because of these changing rainfall patterns, you know, you really need to address it because you can't create a nuisance condition on a down gradient property. Yes, Mr. Gans is downhill. Water runs downhill right now through the wooded site. But once you build the house and you build the driveway and you've cleared the woods for a septic system, and you have a lawn there, that will all generate water. And if it flows in a concentrated form to Mr. Gans, it now creates a nuisance condition, and that's a problem for him, and that's also in violation of the general drainage statute from that. There are several sections in the public improvement regulations for Portland, 90A.3, 98.4, and 98.5 that talk about runoff. These underground gallery systems, while they might, if the soils are suitable, infiltrate, don't necessarily provide treatment. There's no treatment for the driveway. Granted, you're not going to have many cars going in, but if you're having a van go in and out, you're going to have a lot of traffic. You're going to have occasional oil drips. You're going to have metals from the tires and the brake systems that go onto the driveway and then wash off. There's no treatment for that area at all. That needs to be treated and also detained, to prevent adverse impacts on the downgrading properties. There's also a potential area behind the house of a water treatment system, like a water softener. We don't know anything about that at this time. And again, we don't know what the soils are, so there needs to be more information. And I think that you have my report, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Someone else like to speak? Yep, Mr. Law.
There's certainly a lot to respond to, so please bear with me. I think I'm going to start backwards. And, I certainly appreciate everyone's concerns, but I would suggest everything that I'm hearing regarding Mr. Gann, who spoke very nicely, those are issues that are going to arise no matter what goes on this property. I mean, somebody could move there tomorrow and build this size house for themselves. All of the issues that seem to be concerned about something sloping down there, that's where his property is. Something is going to go onto this lot someday. Nothing has for the last 10 years. I'm not quite sure why. But I don't think there's a lot of conjecture there, and I would suggest that whatever is going to happen from the construction of this home is exactly what would happen from the construction of any other home on the site. I understand, I hear concerns raised about the septic and the location. You all have a letter from Chatham Health District, saying that there are no issues with the plan as submitted. And I think, we have to go by that. I'm not, frankly, a lot of what the engineer just said goes over my head. Then you hear a lot of concerns about traffic and 911 calls and access to the property. I struggle that these other homeowners live there and feel that they have no access to these services. If their house is on fire, the same emergency services from our town need to get there. So I don't see any difference between this structure, which is frankly closer to the road than a number of those properties. There's concerns about traffic. Again, I think it's all conjecture. I mean, you put a regular 4-bedroom house there. I mean, I have a 4-bedroom house. I had 2 teenagers in my house. The traffic in and out of my house, my neighbors must have gone out of their minds while that was going on. And for holidays, people visiting, I would imagine these people will go elsewhere for holidays. And if not, I've had 23 cars in front of my house. That happens on holidays. I don't think these are valid reasons, or certainly if they're valid reasons, they're reasons that would apply to any other home that's going to be built on this property. I do believe the zoning regs clearly allow for it. There's a statute that defines this facility. It falls within the healthcare institution because there are no trained medical staff on it. I'm just trying to see what there is adequate staffing. I think there's been a lot of assumption that there are going to be more people at this property than there are. There will be one person there who's not going to sleep in a 9th bedroom at night. Their job is to be awake and administer this property and be there for the residents. So it's not a bedroom. It's an office, if you will, or a room where this person can go for privacy. As far as a driver, there's not going to be an on-site driver. When there's a need for somebody to go out, the driver will come, park their car where the SUV vehicle is, and take that. There's actually 3 garage spots, so even when staff is changing, both staff can park in the garage along with the house car. And then when one leaves, there'll be that open spot again. The sprinkler system is what it is. It's going to have to comply with building codes, so I don't see, the concerns there. I hear the concern, what if this business fails? Well, I think that's just kind of a horrible attitude to, not approve something for fear that it may fail. And secondly, if it does fail, whatever is going to happen at this property, again, it's going to have to comply with our zoning regulations, just as this does. I think, if you go through the site criteria for this property, it meets all of them. It's in compliance with the plan of conservation and development, which specifically requires us to look for alternate housing for our seniors, diversity in income housing, to improve, the general welfare of the community by diversifying housing. I think it just provides a remarkable, opportunity. I also do just want to address that, commercial use was never expected out here. I don't consider this commercial use. I consider it residential use. But I will point out, in the common driveway easement that all 4 of these properties share, the maintenance agreement specifically excluded the declarant from having to participate in the cost of the maintenance of this property until a building has been built on the lot that he owns. Not a dwelling, a building. So, if everybody's saying they never anticipated this, I would suggest the developer perhaps had, because he specifically used the word in your maintenance agreement that provides until a building is on any lot that he owns, he's not required to participate in maintenance. Now that lot's been sold out from the developer, of course, it is required to participate in the maintenance of the property, and my clients certainly intend to do that. So I think that covers it all. I'd like to ask Ben to come back, Ben, to come back up and talk about the lighting, because I know that was an issue, and I believe you had addressed that when you spoke initially.
Actually, the architect addressed that
Okay,
issue. I
I'm
just want to
sorry.
go over a couple of
Sure.
things. Once again, my name's Pat Benjamin. I'm a professional engineer. I just want to go over a couple of things that were mentioned. Number one was the blasting. Most of the houses up there have probably blasted. A good blaster, his insurance company goes out to the site, they do a blast survey. If there's a concern about anything that's close, a well or an abutting house, they use portable seismometers. I've seen them place them on property lines, actually right next to the foundations of homes. They can require the blaster to use smaller charges. So if the house was damaged by blasting somewhere else on that site or one of those lots, there were very large blasts that were being used, and that's typically not done. As to the well, the existing well on the abutter's property is more than 75 feet away from the leaching system. There was a mention that if the well is drawing more than 10 gallons per minute, it goes to 150. That's not usually what they do. If they think the well use is going to be over 10 gallons per minute, they put a larger holding tank in the basement. They make sure that it's pumped at less than that. But I've monitored several facilities with actual water readings like this, and they typically use, on average, about 39 gallons per day per room. It's very low. We've also monitored it for other actual nursing home uses, and they're about 30 gallons per day. The underground system for the roof water, I've designed probably close to 40 lots in Portland. Typically, the town engineer likes us to use 1 inch of rainfall. We've put those into underground galleries on many lots. I've never heard of one issue from the town. I've never heard a complaint. There are larger stormwater events occurring. If the town engineer wants us to enlarge the underground gallery system, we can double the size. As to the footing drain, and once again, the layout of the property is the same as what a 5-bedroom house would be. It would be almost identical to the way we've laid it out. The footing drain discharge, if it runs, we've used that same size underground system, haven't had any issues with it. There was 2 rounds of soil testing done, as I believe there was an original soil testing round, and then Jim Karenberg, I believe from Chatham Health, went back out and retested the lot. So we've used those tests. We also looked at the perk test on the site, so we don't believe there's going to be an issue with either the underground system for the roof water or the footing drain. And as to the fire truck access, it's the same for every house up there. They use a public road, Isinglass Hill Road. This is a private road. It's the same turning movements for any house that's built up there. It's the same for this dwelling. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Pat, can you just address the question about the ledge, and that there was some comment made about how maybe that hadn't been checked out, or?
So what he was saying is that if you're digging a test hole and you hit ledge at less than 24 inches, you can't put a system on it. You can't put a septic system on it. If it's between 12 and 48, we have to prepare the area first before the building permit. And if there's ledge at 48 or greater, depending on the soils, it can be a fill system. So at the end of the system where he's talking about, I've actually been out there with a probe, which is just an iron bar, and I look where we're gonna lay in the system, and I drive it into the ground at least 24 inches to see what's there. If the sanitarian wants another test hole, we can do another test hole, but I think I wanna say there's 10 test holes on this site. Once again, it's similar to a lot of the systems I've designed in Portland before.
It's getting late, and being that a few things I said we use nuance too much here. My point about the 911.
Could you just say your name and?
Lou Zanette.
Yeah.
And again, I think we're going to be 228 or 224 Isinglass. The issue with the 911 is not access to the facility, it's the increased quantity of 911 calls. If you know someone who's elderly living on their own, if they stub their toe, if they don't feel well, maybe it's indigestion, they have no one to take care of them, they're gonna call 911. That's fact. Don't project what may or may not happen, that's fact, if you know someone who's elderly. We hit ledge in places we didn't expect to hit it. In the lot just north of this lot. So just because you put a probe in the ground doesn't mean anything. You need test holes where that septic is gonna go, not where they've put it today. So it's getting late, appreciate everyone's time. Again, there's too many question marks in this thing for you all to say, pass it on. There's too many question marks.
I'm going to be pretty brief. It's Robert Chelzik from 226 Isinglass Hill Road. George, I know you can't see me from here, but we've dealt with each other before. I've built 3 homes in this town, okay? Been here for 35 years, close to 35 years. I didn't buy an existing home. I bought a vacant lot and then build a home from scratch. I believe that, well, when we purchased the lot on 226 Isinglass Hill Road, we purchased a retirement home for ourselves. So we're my wife is retired, I'm pushing 62, so I'll be retired soon. We did not expect a commercial for-profit building in those 4 lots. So that is my sort of a reflection of what's going on right now. As far as what George just laid out to you or gave you some answers to certain things, there is so many, and Lou mentioned this too, there's so many unanswered questions in here, concerns that have been raised to you, okay, that it would probably take months, if not a year, if not longer, to answer some of these. It'll take testing, it'll take experts in order to fully answer all the concerns that not only the residents have, but the town should have. All right? A liability issue here is a main or large concern, not just to the 3 other homes on that lot, but to the town and everyone else that's surrounding that property because of that. All right? Everybody mentioned in here that they have older people that they take care of. I've been taking care of my mom now for about 25 years, okay? 25 years. I brought her here from Poland. She's in New Britain. She lives in New Britain. And I know about home care. I know about adults needing care, all right? And I can tell you right now that there's no way that these people that choose not to have a car or not to have assisted living, that they will not need that care. They might not need it the day they move in, but they're gonna need it 2 weeks from there, 3 weeks from there. No, it's for their safety too. This project is not just a concern to the residents and to Portland, but it should be concerned to all the people that are gonna move in there. Okay? Because, yeah, you know that Isinglass Hill Road at our end is a dead end. So there's one access to that road. There's one access. All it takes is one tree during the storm, and there's no access, not for us, or not for 9 residents, or 8 residents and whoever's gonna take care of them from that house. Whether it's a fire truck, whether it's an emergency, whether it's anything for that matter. All right? We're next to the state forest. Fire. Yeah, sprinkler system might take care of it for a little bit. What if the fire truck doesn't get there because the road is blocked and it's only one access? Now we're looking at a fire with a Department of Environmental Protection involved in this because the state forest is involved. Where's that going? That state forest goes all the way to Vernon and Manchester. All right? None of this stuff is being taken into consideration by the applicant in here. None of it. The only thing that they care about is putting a building in there, regardless what you're hearing. Okay? Putting a building in there and making profit on it. That's all. Okay? I don't want to hear about adult care because I do, or elderly care because I do care of my mom constantly. I'm there at least 2 or 3 times a week, taking her to a New Britain hospital, taking her to the doctor, between my sister and me. And she is living independently in an apartment building on North Street in New Britain. Okay? So, just to say that there's not going to be much of a traffic, I mean, any answer or any question, rather, that you or any of us raise to this has no answer. Oh, maybe. Oh, I will. I'm sorry. It's not just ridiculous. It has absolutely no grounds for being an answer. You just can't. Logically, you cannot answer some of these questions that we had, or some of the answers. You can't justify some of these answers that came up. I would love to see 150 or 350 unit building for an elderly couple, adults rather, on Route 66 where we have a septic and or whatever, we have a septic system, town water and septic. Okay, rather than doing this, it is unsafe both for the residents and it's unsafe for the people that are going to live there. All right. So my suggestion, other than the attorney's comments, that it should not be even considered by you. My suggestion is dig into the research before you vote on it. Thank you. Sorry for being a little out of hand here, but.
Hello, everyone. George Njika. I'm actually a developer. I support my wife, Courtney. So first, I do want to say thank you so much for allowing us this opportunity. I know last few months has been really tough. I really appreciate it. So to address a couple of things, or to bring up a few things, rather, from a different perspective, need perspective, right? So nearly 44% of senior housing inventory is now about 25 years old, right? Which to me highlights a need for newer, more advanced housing. And the number of senior housing units under construction currently is at its 10-year low. And those units under construction represents about 1.4% of the inventory. And to me, right there, means a lot or says a lot. And that 1.4%, and if you look geographically, it tends to be more concentrated in Florida and Arizona, right? Which right there, it says that here we're probably underdeveloped, when it comes to senior housing. And I think a lot of people agree with me that this is an opportunity for Portland elderly community, as it allows them to stay comfortably here in town, closer to their family and friends. As a real estate developer, I can say this with certainty. A lot of focus within the real estate development community, the developers themselves, they focus more on serving the shortage of housing within the work from home community. And there is a great neglect on the senior housing. As you may all know, there is a tsunami coming of seniors needing housing. And I think we have an opportunity to set a precedent on how they will be cared for. Also on how we will be cared for as we get older. Because we all, at some point, we will need more comfortable living that's hassle-free, where we're closer to our families and our community that we have served for the longest time. Me personally, I would want to go and live in Arizona. I love New England. This is where I'm gonna call home, probably for the rest of my life. And finally, researchers at the University of Chicago Med School did a study on senior living. And they found out that on average, seniors who live in this type of housing, they tend to live longer, they're healthier, they spend less time at the doctor's office. And to me, that sort of translates that there's fewer 911 calls because they're all healthier. There's somebody there to watch them around the clock. I think another issue that need to be addressed or brought up or rather emphasized is the COVID, how it brought isolation to our seniors. Most of our seniors are isolated. I think we got very, very accustomed to not visiting, right? And I believe, most of them, at these big facilities, they tend to be lonely and, unhealthy. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, George?
And I apologize, I know you have other matters, and I'll be very, very brief. I just want to point out again, I disagree with Brother Counsel. This is a permitted use under our zoning permitted use table. If you look at the criteria, the 12 items set forth under site plan review, I think we meet each and every single one of them. Chatham Health has approved it, Fire Marshal's approved it. I understand there's a lot of opposition. I believe everybody's issue is with our zoning regulation that allows this. And I think that's where energy needs to be focused. If you want to change the regulation, change the regulation. But I think unequivocally, the regulation allows for this type of development on the property. I personally, as I get very close to the age of the people who will be living there, see this as a great opportunity for Portland. The plan of conservation and development screams about making these types of living arrangements available for other people. I think it meets the criteria. I don't see how it can't be, approved. Certainly, that's up to this commission, but again, I think the comments we're hearing tonight are directed at the regulation as it exists, not so much that this plan does not comply with the regulation.
Someone else? Sure. Come on up.
Brief. My name's Angelo Listrina. I live on 227 Isinglass Hill Road. I heard a lot about elderly housing. My mother-in-law is 94 years old, and she lives at the lower bottom of Isinglass at the cul-de-sac. She's living independently on her own, okay? I built my house on Lower Isinglass 35 years ago. I've been driving up and down Lower Isinglass since 1975 when my wife and I were dating, okay? It's a narrow street. They just put the cul-de-sac in there, the turnaround, probably 20 years ago. There was never even a turnaround down there. So for the usage of all the cars and people, you know, well, let's go back to the storm of the 2 storms we had, where Isinglass was totally closed down for a week. We didn't have power for a week. You couldn't access, you couldn't get up and down Isinglass at all. There was trees across the road. You couldn't, for a week, over a week, we didn't have power and we didn't have access down the road. So those are some issues we have to look at. And yeah, the accessibility for ambulances, fire trucks. We might see a police car come down Lower Isinglass 2 times a year. I mean, it's just not feasible for that type of, you know, traffic. Let's put it that way. There's not even a Meridian line on Isinglass Road. There hasn't been a Meridian line for over 100 years. I mean, it's just an open roadway, you know, so that's all I have to say. It's not feasible for what they want to do.
Thank you. Someone else like to speak? Okay, seeing no further public comment, open it up for questions, comments from commission members. Discussion.
Well, I want Bob to weigh in on the, is it really allowed? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean,
Speak up.
that might actually be a better question for Dan at this point.
I'm sorry?
Because, well, the memo that Attorney George has mentioned, that we were given pretty last minute. And I don't know, Dan, have you had a chance to review it at least and at least see if it's a permitted use pursuant to our regulations?
Briefly, but I probably would want to go back and reevaluate and just double check that.
That's one of the key points I was going to make too, is that we need legal clarification on whether this is a permitted use or not.
So we can certainly provide a memo regarding that if you'd like.
Yes, I would. Anyone, any disagreement?
No, I mean, that was my question. So, I'll just say that the other things that I'm hearing, I'm hearing these concerns from the neighbors of potential blasting problems and runoff problems, and I understand that. I also understand that those types of things would happen likely whenever that piece of property got developed. In you know, to a similar degree, most likely. The thing that I'm most concerned with is the idea that they're going to be. Oh, I'm sorry. God, I'm so loud. I'm never told to speak up.
I'm sorry, I know it's late.
Can I just ask as a is the public hearing closed?
No, the public hearing is still open.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I understood what was
My
happening.
concerns are more along the lines of it's 8 people, and there are a lot of services, even though these people are elderly and they may not be running around like a 2-year-old, but they require a lot of services. And it just seems like I would expect that there would be a lot more people required to keep that place going, to take care of 8 people. That's what I'm thinking of. But, I mean, I don't know how much I need to care about the business plan, but that's my concern.
I'd just like to, we got handed this packet now.
Yeah, well, that.
I'd like to have, number one, have time to review it, but there's a lengthy letter from their attorney and also a lengthy letter from their engineer. So I'd like our attorney to look at.
Happy to do so.
And then I'd like if Jeff could review the engineer's comments and get us some feedback. I mean, we've heard from both parties, but I'd like to hear from our engineer.
Agreed.
Should we also have the health department take a look at it too?
And
Because,
possibly Chatham
I
Health,
believe they
yeah.
also make a comment saying they disagree with the Chatham Health Department's opinions. So we might as well have, if we're gonna have them send it back for review, we might as well have everyone look at it again.
Now, which for Chatham, like the whole thing, or are you talking about the need for another test hole?
Just some of
the
the
distance.
concerns and the
Okay.
engineering report we were just, given.
That's a good idea. Yeah, comment on the engineer's report.
And that probably would give the applicant more time to, review the opinions in there and, provide their own assessment and counters to it.
And then, my question, and I was just wondering, like, usually we see how far they are from the other property lines and stuff, and I don't know that I saw that.
So
Like the butters and the property lines and the homes.
So you have the site plan, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't
Yeah, but
have.
I think we
It's
sent
only
the
that.
original out, I sent the second.
So you need a site plan.
Well, I have a site plan, but I don't see anywhere where it tells me, I have all of this, but I don't see where are the other houses located?
So I could provide you an aerial photo of the property and the surrounding. Would that work
I went
to
up
scale?
there and drove by it, but, I can't remember everything.
Okay, so what I can do is I can make a map
Yeah, and I
showing the
don't know where the
property,
lines are.
surrounding property lines,
Yeah.
with an aerial photo with the leaf off so you can see where the other houses
And then
are.
I would also be curious as to the size of the other houses. Because this home, I think they said it was like 4,200.
I think the footprint was that big, but the overall square footage of the facility was
And I'm just wondering what the other homes around are.
like direct to butters.
Are they comparable or?
All right, so I'll get direct to butters, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so a map. Surrounding. And size.
You let me know when appropriate, but I had an answer to 2 of the questions.
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
Yeah. So, to that last question was in comparison to the other homes. I think our architect said it was just within 20% difference from a square footage perspective. And then the question, I would really like to answer the question about the business plan. So I've been consulting and working with the facility residents that is in Marlborough, Connecticut, that is actually 10 bedrooms with some shared bedrooms. So they have about 11, they have 11 residents currently. So that's what we're modeling after. And typically they don't see more than 2 vehicles there at a time. Again, these residents don't need too much care because they can live independently. They're choosing to be taken care of to some degree and to have the companionship. So the caretaker can throw in a batch of laundry, make dinner and socialize with them, all while taking care of, less than 2 to 3 activities of daily living. But we could certainly bring that business model forward and we'd be willing to give that transparency.
So, can I ask another
Yeah,
question?
go ahead.
To you, please? So these people, you don't have to help them dress or shower or?
Those are activities of daily living that they may need assistance with, right?
So is this kind of a little bit like custodial care?
I wouldn't say so because they are able to make decisions for themselves. They are well-minded. They just, rather than holding the bar in the shower, they would like someone to be there. Like to address the 911 question, I think the gentleman brought up a good point. People living independently stub their toe, they call 911. The caretaker in this situation would say, you just stubbed your toe, let me take care of that.
But they couldn't render medical assistance.
Yeah, one speaker at a time, please. Mhm.
Louis George again. Thank you. I'll be very brief because I know it's getting late, but there are a couple of things I have to answer. With regard to the square footage, the proposed building is 6,600, 230, which is Mr. Craffa's is 2,800 square feet, and Mr. Gant's 2,100 square feet, the building size. So they're not comparable. It's 3 times the size. And we're getting a lot of those answers that aren't really fact. And with regard, the last point I'll make, which is a really important one, and I'm sure your attorney will look at it, but if you do look at the definitions and we laid them out, a residential care home, which is in their application, that's what they have, is nowhere in your regulations, and it is not allowed. And you can review those, but I provided each definition for you, and you can look at that. And everything that's allowed is really skilled, convalescent, that hospital, that type of thing. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the public or from commission members? Okay, then, we would need to keep this public hearing open, so do we have a motion?
So moved.
Whoa.
Well, I'll have to read the motion. It'll be brief. Motion to continue application 23-12, 220 Isinglass Hill Road, request for special permit for construction of an 8-bedroom residential care home, application of Oroville Place LLC and property of Sean McGrail Revocable Trust, Mass 129, Lot 9, Zone RR. May I have a second?
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Okay, the motion to continue the application, the public hearing is approved. Okay. So before we move on to the next and probably more complicated application, anybody object to a 5-minute recess?
I was gonna ask you for that.
Okay. 5-minute recess, please. Okay, we will continue the meeting then. Our next item is continuation of public hearing for application 23-15, which is a proposed amendment to the zoning regulations, change to section 9.17.1, change the maximum number of 2 bedrooms to 30%, where 55 is currently allowed, at a maximum number of 16 residential units per historic building restored. Remove text from section 9.17.5.m.2, quote, "For good cause shown and following a public hearing, the developer may secure relief from this requirement as a modification to the approved plan, provided that the commission is satisfied that conditions beyond the control of the developer will prevent the execution of the schedule of development as approved," end quote. Application to BenServ. So this, as I mentioned, this is a continuation from our meeting 2 weeks ago. Dan did provide us with some information that we requested. This afternoon, we got the information. I don't know, Ben, did you want to kick it off?
Would you want me to go through that real quick?
You want to go through it?
Sure. So I provided you Ryan's sewer memo. I only provided Jeff Jacobs' email to the record. I figure I would just tell you verbally that Jeff was in agreement with all of Ryan's analyses and conclusions from that memo. So Jeff didn't deviate at all from the memo that Ryan gave you, so he concurs with what Ryan said. Was looking into where the 55% came from and the 16 came from, and we went down a pretty long rabbit hole, and I was not able to come up with something. Now, read the VCI report. That did not indicate why. Now, in the VCI report, it talks about the steering committee that was formed. There was 3 meetings back in 2015. There were no minutes or recordings of those public meeting sessions, so I could not locate those. I went back and I read the minutes from the 2016 approval. No indication in there as to where the 55 or the 55% 2 bedrooms and the 16 came from. So I'm sure there was a reason. So I guess you'll just have to trust that they had their reasons at the time, and that's what they were. And you'll have to reevaluate those things based on their own merits now. I did provide you the memo on the properties that this affects from the prior applications. When did 9.17.5.m.2 come into existence? I can tell you it was before 2008 for sure. So it was most likely in the original reg when that was done. There were, I believe, 3 or 4 changes made from 2008 onward to the regulations. We have a good record in our zoning regulations, as you can see in the back appendix, for applications from 2008 on. If you really want to know when that came into use, I'll have to go back and look through the town clerk's office and some other records to see exactly when that came to be.
It's been in there for a long time.
Yeah, it's been in there since before 2008. So my guess is that would probably be there from the beginning. And then lastly, there's also what good cause shown is beyond the control of the developer. I don't have a great answer on that. That's really, like I think you guys talked about in the prior meeting, subjective. I think it was subjective on purpose, so it would allow you guys to make a judgment call based on whatever the good cause shown would be, and then it would give you the latitude to make that decision. Lastly, a couple examples of different unit ratio allowances. I did provide a memo on that, and that was just provided to you today.
Okay, thank you for all that research. Appreciate it. Did you want to make a statement?
I did, Bob. Thank you. Ben Serb, for the record, West Cotton Hill Road, Scarlett again. A few things I just wanted to point out on. One of the things Dan put in his memo, I'll start, sorry, Dan.
That's fine, we disagree.
We disagree on one word. In the bottom of Dan's memo where he gives you guys some rough scenarios what could occur on a site. he puts at the bottom, I believe it could negatively affect the number of resources being preserved. I'll stand.
Can you speak a little louder?
I'm sorry. In Dan's memo, but if it looks like I'm leaning over, as long as you guys don't feel offended that I'm leaning over. His last sentence, I believe it could negatively affect the number of resources being preserved in the future. I disagree with that. And I think the proof is, so far to date, we've had one application under the mixed-use development. And in that application, there were 6 identified historic resources. And because our regs were not what I'm proposing, we allowed the ratio to basically, I got to think this through, I think he could have got the ratio with 1 preservation throughout the entire site. The point is, we now lost the other 3. They're gone. Had there been a number, which I proposed here tonight, the other 6 would have been on the table, or the other 3 would have been on the table and potentially increased the number that this person could have received, or that site could have received, or the next site for that matter. So I really like working with Dan, and but I just disagree with the one word negative. I believe we should change that to positive, because there are positive effects, or at the very least we could agree maybe it's both. I could get on board with that, but at the very least there were 3 lost on the only site that we had. That's a fact. Had we had a ratio in place, that may not have occurred. I'm sure the developer's here tonight. He may stand up and say, I wouldn't have saved the other 3 no matter what. But maybe a different developer, or a developer that had less motivation on the residential would have. And so I truly believe that that not to be the case in what Dan wrote. So I'm also not going to stand up here and talk all night because it's late, but I do want to go over a few things. So does everybody have a comfort level with our sewer plant situation? Does everybody on this commission understand we're running at 50% capacity and we have approximately 4.1 million plus in deficiencies at our plant? As a body, you guys?
Did Ben get a copy of the memo that we got?
The sewer memo? Ben has a copy of everything you have. I think that's safe to say.
Yes, and then some, but it might take me a little while to find it, but I do have everything.
We probably have everything that you have.
Probably not. I usually carry things that
Oh, you do?
may not be relevant, but may get, just in case I need them. So
We have that.
You do.
Yes, you do have the sewer
And
memo,
and then on top of it, in the last meeting, you wanted the town engineer to weigh in, which I respected and I get. And his response was exactly what I thought for one professional to another. There's no difference. These are known facts, and I shouldn't have been the one to let you guys know our sewer plant's in that condition. That's something you guys should have definitely known, not from Ben Serb, but whatever. You learned it. We now know it. As a town and as a group, we have to discuss this. It's the big elephant in the room. We have a situation that's not going to be fixed overnight. When considering reg changes, they should be, at the very least, tightening things up, not loosening when it comes to, I'll give you an example, the 70-30. That would be definitely in the spirit of sewer plant trouble. Tighten up bedrooms if you feel comfortable. Absolutely no reason not to do that. Number one, that's the only application to date, is the 70-30. I'm not trying to take something away from this developer. Quite frankly, I want him to finish the project he started. I want it to come out perfect. I have no problem saying that. But I also wanted to do what he was approved to do and what he was required to do from a historic standpoint and from a commercial ratio. One of the other things that I want to add that, and I can't take credit for this, but the more it came out in the last meeting, up at the school, because it's relevant, we can talk about it, it's another, was the size of a potential building dwarfing everything else on this site. This site already has 2 big towers, the only approved one. A 3rd tower would be, I didn't realize it until it was brought up, what it's going to do to the other side of that site. And keep in mind, now use that same hat and apply it to the other potential mixed-use spots. We really got to get our regs in line. I do believe my 3 changes do that. So once again, I'm going to go back to, does everybody fully get the sewer plant situation where we're at as a community? But, because then
I'm
I
just
can.
gonna summarize it in my layman's
Oh.
terms, make sure I got it and make sure everyone else got it. Even under the proposed plan for Brainerd Place, we are uncomfortably close to our maximum sewer capacity level, the way it exists today.
Excellent, excellent.
And to bring it up above and beyond that level would be a $4.1 million investment.
And keep in mind, I want to be clear, as a community, we are going to have to fix our sewer plant at some point.
Yeah.
Having said that, I do believe as a community, given a certain amount of time, we're going to find grants, we're going to find ways to do it. We can't afford 4.1 million when we have approximately 84 million with interest for our new school, potentially another 11 million plus interest for the high school. I mean, that's about 100 million there, 4 million there. Before you know it, we're broke. I don't want to see that. I love this community. We can start talking about it. There's no shame in saying we have major deficiencies. They've been identified. I think as a community, we do need to recognize it. We need to talk about it. It's not a big deal. But moving forward, we also have to be very careful, and I'll give you one example. There's nothing preventing the only approved applicant at this point from switching a bunch of bedrooms. He could put in an application if my change isn't approved, the 70-30. He could do that. He's entitled to that. Boy, I don't want to see that. I'm up here tonight with these reg changes requesting that we get through the 3 topics, and I'm going to hope that you guys have a comfort level to vote on my 3. And I want to go through them one by one like I just did. I think the 70-30, at least in my mind, makes sense. And if you guys have any more questions, please bring them up. I don't want to be here all night just like you don't. And then I'm going to move on to the waiver, and then I'm going to move on to the historic preservation and get off this podium.
The only thing.
Please, Rob.
With the sewer that I was more concerned about, that it technically would be a temporary thing because it has a limit of 1.2 million gallons. But because it needs those fixes, it's at half capacity. And I had asked Dan what the Board of Selectmen were, talking about for this, and didn't want to dig through Board of Selectmen meeting minute because of, other topics relating to other, things. We were told not to look at outside stuff. I didn't want to stumble on something. So I guess, just for the record at this point, if we do hear, like what's going on from the Board of Selectmen about this, what their plan is and how they plan on going about this, whether they're going to go for state grants, federal grants, or something like that. Because, I mean, even as the project as it stands, 96%, that could easily just, that could go wrong very quickly.
Do you want me to pose that question to the board and ask them for a response? Back to you guys?
I think we need to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we do.
If I may, you need to know if there's somebody proposing to increase bedrooms or increase the amount of units. You don't need to know on a decrease. A decrease would 100% be putting the town in a better position, and there isn't anybody in the room that can't do that math. If you feel comfortable with the 70-30, which has been the only application to date on a mixed use, and you feel that's probably the appropriate number moving forward, you 100% have the ability, and I don't believe there's any input. To your point, I'm not even sure how much they knew until I just personally walked into the Public Works Director's office and wanted to know all this. There was no memo prior to that. They figured it out to get my questions answered, and it took them 2 or 3 weeks from the time I emailed them to the time they came up with an answer on the dollar amount of the deficiencies. So to your point, Rob, and I can say this in the meeting and you'll now know it, there isn't a plan or wasn't a plan moving forward at that point. As a taxpayer, I'm suggesting they go and find grants and things like that because we just don't have the money. Great question. But as far as my application, no, my application, you've got everything you need to make a decision. That's easy. I'm requesting to go down that route. You're putting the town in a better position no matter what, if you were so inclined.
So, I just to ask the board, what do you want me to do?
Are we going to go down the table? I don't think we need to address this with the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
I agree. It's not our, it's not our job. It's not our.
I'm just asking if you want the info.
I mean, it's not our job, but we're basing policy on it.
But it's
for
something that has
long-term.
to be fixed, though. I mean, it's not like,
Right,
it's
so-
not like they're saying, this is the way it is and it's never gonna change. It's something that they
So,
have to deal with.
I mean, if it's
So-
something that's gonna be fixed, then why, make a reactive decision and reduce, or restrict options on our zoning regulations and reduce the amount of possible units to be built just based off of something that could be fixed.
I don't think it's just based off of that, though. I think there were
Well,
other.
you said two things, correct?
Well, you just said number of units. I want to be clear. I'm not proposing any additional units.
It was percentage reduction of.
Bedrooms.
Of bedrooms.
Sorry, yeah,
Which I feel, if that's the type of clientele you want for a nice downtown mix, it is the smaller bedrooms. It is the people that are gonna go, they don't have all the kids, they're gonna go out to eat and they're gonna do this and we're gonna get a nice mixed use. That's where I truly believe the 30-70 works. And quite frankly, Mr. Bertram must have agreed to that at some point too, because he applied for a 70-30, the only one we have to date. So I'd like to see moving forward, our other ones that come in or potentially come in, potentially follow the same thing we as a community of essentially the only one we've seen. I think it's great. I have no issue with the 70-30. I wouldn't have proposed it if I did, obviously. But where do you guys? I'm trying to get feedback real quick I think the 70-30 is perfect. I think there's good reasons to do that regardless of our sewer plan.
Yeah, you had, I think, I don't have it in front of me right now, but you had stated a number of reasons why it wasn't just the sewer.
Correct. I do believe if you really look at I don't want to talk here all night, but the number of bedrooms, the smaller you are, you're going to have obviously less children. You're going to have people that may be, and there's been testimony on the only application we've had about the type of clientele they're looking for, and they're not looking for children, and that's the bedrooms backs that up. So it makes sense. And when you want a walkable downtown community, and these are the type of people you're trying to attract to live there, absolutely, a 70-30 is excellent. So.
And my comment on that is just, I think you're limiting yourself to not having two people that don't, that aren't, roommates. You're limiting people who want to be roommates by having one bedroom. That's the thing. I think it's more limiting for what it's, kind of for what it's worth. I think it's potentially more limiting, that's all.
It is, but so is 55%. So at some point we
Right, and that's why I wanted to know where the 55 came from to help with that, to help understand that.
Not to interrupt, sorry. And I sat through a lot of those meetings back then when we did throw all these regs into place, and a lot of it was best guess, honestly. It was, what do we feel is appropriate? And now we have a little bit more than best guess. We have an application. Once again, I'm not trying to take anything. I want to be clear that, the applicants in the room, I'm not trying to take anything that's the approval on the table. No, this is moving forward for the next one. He's all set. He's got his development approved. He's going to finish that project. I'm going to find a way to support it when it's the right mix and everything stays the way I want it. I'll be the guy standing up here supporting it. In the interim, we now are just discussing our regs for the mixed-use development that applies everywhere. I can't find a reason, and I would, if somebody wants to, other than Chantel did come up with a reason, and does anybody else have a reason that they could lean towards keeping the 55? To me, that's just, whoa, we're much better off with a 30-70. So I have to respect your decisions, but I think the 30-70 is the right number, but.
But nothing stops us from saying the project's too big or you have too many two-bedroom units, like we want you to reduce it because that has to go through us it says maximum, so what we could always say as a condition, no more than X amount of two-bedroom units.
The two-bedroom allows up to, it doesn't say allows up to 55, correct?
It says with a maximum of 55%.
Set by the applicant, not by you. If it meets the regs, it meets the regs. Carrie will chime in on that. If it meets the regs and somebody wants to apply for 55% two-bedroom, you better have a better reason than that. It's a special permit. You can have other things, but it's not going to be based on the bedrooms. If you meet the criteria on the bedrooms, they're going to get that. There are a lot of other things you have leeway on, but that one, you either meet the reg or you don't. Once again, if you put a 30-70 in, that's the reg they need to meet.
Well, again, under the special permit criteria, they do have some discretion, and because we're not dealing with a special permit tonight, I can't speak to that. clearly. But I wouldn't say that when a regulation says up to, they don't have any discretion under a special permit process for good reason, based on their criteria, to say that they want it less than that.
You could always say we wanted it more. We could go
No, right now, it's up to, right?
up to-
It says with a maximum of.
Maximum, you can't go over that, but you can go under it.
Right, but if somebody came with 55, you couldn't then say 70-30.
Right.
Because it said 55, but if it was at 70-30, somebody wanted 55, we could allow that.
No.
With a special, no?
No. No, so.
Without changing the reg.
Correct.
Okay. But it would be a special permit, right?
To change
The
the reg?
the regulation.
To get to change that percentage.
No, it'd be another text amendment.
Another text amendment.
Yep.
Well, I'll let you guys do on that one.
Let's-
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
move on. I
Okay,
don't
yeah.
think, I'm not hearing a clear answer from you.
Yep. So the next one was I'll jump to the waiver. You weren't able to, it was your best guess, right? You weren't able to find where that was created. It was prior to 08. It was probably from the.
I believe it's from the original regulation.
I think you and I completely agree on that. Did anybody have any questions on that, now that we know it's probably been there since the beginning?
Well, I think we've heard the current developer say that, negotiation is critical when you're entering into an agreement. And allowing for modifications to plans as things change is important, having that flexibility. Now, whether it belongs in a zoning regulation or whether it belongs in a contract negotiation, I'm not sure the right place. So the question I've been asking myself, does this sort of allowance for negotiation belong in a zoning regulation? Is the question I'm asking myself. And I haven't answered it yet.
So my take on the waiver is, I can't think of any circumstance where we'd ever want to be in the boat where all the residential, or potentially most of the residential, gets built and we're left with none of the commercial. Because let's face it, the whole reason we as a small community, and I'm speaking to all you guys, we're all part of this small community. The whole reason we adopted the mixed-use development in Portland was to get a mixed use. It was never, ever intended to ever get lopsided. And I think there's unexpected consequences can occur, and we can be put in a bad position. And I think the most important, I'll give you one example. If a developer stands up here and says, well, interest rates went up, guys. It's outside my control. I can't build the commercial now. I can only build it if they come, or something to that effect. Really? That's where we want to be as a community? No way.
So as I recall, this regulation has to do with the phasing.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And it sounds like your concern is that if we allow changes to the phasing, later phases may not get done.
Correct. More importantly, not just the word phasing, Bob, more importantly, it's the ratio, commercial to residential ratio.
So you want to keep that
Hol-
ratio
holy smoke.
constant throughout all phases?
We need to.
Is that the intent here?
And that's what our regs state, unless you get a waiver. The only time you lose that is if you get a waiver.
So
And that,
the waiver could allow those ratios to change for a time, but if all obligations are completed, the intended ratios should remain in place.
except the only time it's been used to date, at the 8/18/22 meeting, the developer in this one case stated, the commercial may not come. Here's where we are, and I'm not just referring to this one site, I want to be clear.
Yep.
Right. We're talking about all potential mixed-use developments in the future. Do we, as a community, do we want that reg if it doesn't work? Essentially, that's the definition of not working. If you want residential development to increase your downtown traffic, I can respect that. And we can put that in a residential neighborhood, that's easy. We have lots of that compared to our commercial. We have almost none. We're talking about a very limited area in the town of Portland that is actually developable commercial land. It's that simple. We've got to be very careful when it comes to the residential being placed in our commercial. The only reason we agreed to it in this regulation when we created mixed use was because of the ratio, and that's a fact. If we lose that ratio, what do we have? We have residential development being placed in our best commercial sites. Where does that get us as a community? That's terrible. I mean, really, I don't have a better phrase to tell you. Where do you guys, in the sake of time, I just want to bounce it back off you guys. Where do you guys feel on my waiver idea? I mean, if I get overruled, if you guys don't agree with me, I'm just up here trying to protect Portland. So I hope I come across as that, because that's all I'm doing. I have no horse in this race.
When we talk about phasing, we're also talking about the issuance of a CO. So previously, the one case I've seen where we came in, it was a revision to the permit. But this seems to allow, just if we want to give them the leeway, whoever the developer is, we could give it to them. And right now it says 50% of your, the way I understand it, you'd have, if you were doing residential and commercial, you'd have to have, if you want to get a CO for your residential, you'd need 50% of your commercial for that phase to be complete. So the way I'm reading this is we could waive that without, but it says we need a special,
Good cause.
we need a public hearing, but it's not necessarily a revision to the permit. Or am I misreading that?
And I want to, and I can't remember who said it at this meeting, but somebody said it at the 8/18 meeting, is you want to give the developer the best chance to succeed.
Right.
And I can't agree with that more. And I hope we're all referring to succeed in the entire project. If we're just allowing part of it, and there was another board member that sat up here and specifically, brought up that what if that isn't the outcome that we wanted? And I'm up here now saying, look, you have a regulation proposal in front of you that only protects the town of Portland. If something changes, you guys have the right to change that. But as of now, we need to tighten up these regs. All three of my changes are, I'm biased, are very appropriate. And I really put some thought into how it will affect this town as a whole. I'm not leaving. Hopefully my great-grandkids are going to live here. And I put a lot of effort into getting this right. And once again, none of my proposals are to take away anything from the approved site that we have. We need to work with Mr. Bertram in the future. That's not what we're doing here tonight. What we're doing here tonight is visiting our regs, and you guys are going to have a decision to make. Is Ben's position a sound position, and does it protect our town moving forward? And does it have more positive than negative? And honestly, if you do agree with me on those three changes, then I would hope we can get to a vote and we can just, you guys are going to make a tough decision in the next few weeks, whether it's tonight or whether it's with hundreds of people in the room at the next one. But this is coming. I really look forward to please ask me any questions that you might have to pick me apart if you don't agree with my changes. But
I guess one of the concerns I have is if we remove this waiver, would that be a turnoff to future developers? If they felt like the flexibility.
That's an awesome question. And I've done a handful of development, nothing to this size. And I would say, look, and obviously I look at things differently. I never start anything that I can't finish. I look at every project in its totality. And quite frankly, Bob, to your point, maybe it wouldn't have been as ambitious. Maybe there wouldn't have been, for the next site, maybe the next guy's not going to pick 240. Maybe he's going to pick Dan's ratio. Dan gave you guys a ratio. Maybe he's going to go with the second one for the bottom, and he's going to only build 20,000 square feet, which you guys just approved me to, I think, build approximately 15,000 up on 66. Pretend that's a mixed-use development. Using that same scenario, and I was able to preserve 3 historic somethings on that site, I would get 60 apartments. Think about that. 20,000 square feet gets you 60 apartments. What's so, think about our community. That's definitely more appropriate. And I'm not saying this development, you know, this needs to be a good one down here, but it needs to be balanced. So, but picture the next one. What's wrong with that second to last scenario? It's awesome. You get a certain amount of commercial, you get the apartments that we supposedly need, you don't take up all of our commercial space, you get a balanced mixed use. That's what, keep in mind, we have residential regulations that allow for large residential developments all over town. That's not what we're considering here. This is about a mixed use development somewhere with city water, city sewer, or potential city water, city sewer in our community. And what do we want to see? And I think these proposed text amendments meet our objectives as a community, and they match the plan of conservation and development, quite frankly.
Dan, we don't have any definition for historic building, correct?
It's historic resource, is what it says.
In
So
our-
it could be a fence.
So-
It could be a fence if it's identified. It could be a railroad trestle. I think, Rob, where you're going is, it could be anything identified in the plan of conservation. It could have been the fence around Elmcrest, which is not.
Yeah, but
Could have been the railroad trestle is one of them. Could have been the railroad tracks, if they're still in place, things like that.
So I guess, but historic resources aren't the same as calling a historic building. And I know, because
Right.
you pointed out that, you know, someone could buy like a shed or a carriage house, have it shipped to a property, and now you have, you know, maybe you combine 4 of those and you put them on there. I mean, would that count? Or is
Yes.
it only what is original to the town of Portland? So they go to Middletown, they buy an old, you know, 1700s carriage house, they
No,
have
no,
it
no.
shipped over and put on a property.
Just in the name of not being up here all night. No, it has to be identified on our plan of conservation and development in the town of Portland. But then, yes, anything on there that's been identified could be moved to any potential site, and that's the whole reason behind it. So you do get to save those resources.
So yeah, it is the town of Portland. It is a significant historic resource as identified in our plan of conservation and development.
Yes.
This body is in control of the plan of conservation and development. You're charged with writing that. So if new significant historic resources are identified that you think should be included in the plan, that's possible. If you do not think it's a significant historic resource, so a fence, you don't have to include it. Now, certainly you can also you could remove some of these from the list, and I think one of them that's come up is the rail bed. You know, what is even preserving that mean? You know, at that point, you get into that debate. So you do have control over what is considered a significant historic resource. You know, and that will be addressed every 10 years.
And to follow up on what Dan's saying, I do believe it's going to be addressed actually in a larger, you're going to probably get many requests to get things added, which is good, and I want to be clear, and that's where my ratio is then more important, because these are coming, whether we accept it or not. There are plenty of things that we do want to see saved as a community, and there's only one driver to get it. Give the guy more apartments. He's going to take that item, put it on his site, he's going to do what we wanted, fine. I respect that. I'm tweaking this to do that. So you're going to see, I believe, in the 2026 revision, there's going to be a proposal for more things added to it, and you're actually going to have a better chance of saving those with what I'm proposing tonight. Is basically, it takes me a while to get full circle, and I hope I'm getting you there, Chantel. I'm really.
Caught under my bag, sorry about that.
I was looking through some other towns' regulations, just trying to find some verbiage that was similar to this. The commission is satisfied that conditions beyond the control of the developer. And, you know, obviously this is mixed use and it's different, but I couldn't find anything in any regulations remotely similar to this sentence in the other towns that I looked at.
That very well may be true. You know, I haven't looked at the regs. Now, in all these towns, though, you can modify a special permit, a site plan. So if they didn't have this particular phasing regulation that talks about you have to move in that particular fashion in those particular phases, you could simply come in for a modification of the approval. Am I saying that right, Carrie? Yeah, so you could come in to modify what you got approved. You know, you guys see it all the time. You know, 2 buildings could go to 6 buildings.
I think he's talking about me.
Yeah, so, you know, it's possible. So the wording of the MUD regulation requires this particular waiver on the phasing in order to have some flexibility. You could have somebody resubmit an entire MUD application and do a special permit from scratch. That would be the other option I would see if you took away the phasing. They would then submit a brand new MUD application for the project they're working on as a you know what I mean? So it wouldn't be a modification, you just propose a new special permit MUD. So there is another way to go about it, but you know, certainly it's up to you whether you want to maintain the flexibility throughout the phases.
I understand what you're saying, Ben, it's tightening things up, but on the other hand, I don't think it's a bad decision to state that, you know, that we can consider things that are really outside of the developer's control. I mean,
Once again, you can still extend the permit. There's other, I don't think even, unless you tell me this, I don't think you can come up with a scenario where you want to see a project get so lopsided and the developer stands up here at this microphone and tells you, I just can't find commercial, but thanks for giving me all the residential. Could you, I mean, picture that, I mean, this town would, and one other thing I want to read that was submitted by Dan's attorney at the last meeting. If you go on page 3, second paragraph from the bottom, he says, the attorney, not Dan, the Planning and Zoning Commission will not be able to assess the impacts of the zoning amendments on the preserving the historic resources. So number one, I would have added the word proposed zoning amendments, but do a full stop now and read that. You know what that says? He doesn't realize, in that case, there are 3 buildings already identified on his plan to be preserved. Why would we ever want to take into consideration anything to do with those homes? In the 8/18 meeting, he stated the Sage House, the Brainerd House, and the Hart Jarvis building would all be preserved. Why in the world would we then be assessing the impacts of a zoning amendment on the preserving of the historic resources? What does that tell you? They're not done. That's what it tells you. So I think it's so important that you guys truly, really think about these 3 changes and how they're going to benefit this community, get us where we need to be, and get these developments, all of them, finished properly. Because that's the only outcome we all want, as you know, this board and myself. I truly believe we all just want these things to come out right. It's how do we get to right. And I get your point, Chantel, that you want to have flexibility. You still do. It's a special permit application. You guys are in the driver's seat. I expect you to work with developers on modifications, like Carrie mentioned, all legit. Timeframes, once again, within state statute, it can be also modified. You guys have a lot of leeway without any of the language with that waiver. Absolutely. There's no scenario that this community is going to accept a lopsided project with very little to no commercial. I mean, that's just ludicrous. Really, that's not a mixed use. So that kind of really, I don't know. So, anybody else have comments on that one before I get to the last one?
Well, I just, you know, if you took something like that away and you're saying, oh, they just submit another special permit.
No, a modification. In other words.
I'm wondering what the financial impact is.
Great,
you know,
great question.
With regard to.
I'll give you the one example to date. COVID, okay? State then extended site plans, how long, Carrie?
14 years.
State gets involved. There's other tools when there's strange things like that. Okay, it's not just, that wasn't unique to Portland. That was across, we all know. So I'm not even
Well,
getting.
it depended on when you got your approval, but
Right.
the outside was 14.
Yeah, essentially, if there was a approved plan in place, I believe
By a certain date.
it was extended, and this one meant that. Once again, the financial impacts were coming either way from COVID. This doesn't change any of that. The only thing it changes is what we get as an outcome, or potentially. We need to really think about this. Once again, can you guys give me one example where you'd ever want to see a scenario that all the residential gets built, or the majority, and very little commercial, and we're done? Like, really? That's terrible. That's not the intent of the reg in any way, but we can easily be in that boat, right? Easily. Right? So, once again, my 3 changes that I'm requesting only help us. They do not, I don't see any detriment, because you still have leeway under special permit.
I guess I question
Please.
that, because I believe the town has the right to withhold the COs for the residents, if the proper percentage of commercial is not built.
Before the waiver, yes. Now he's the only one we have, phase 1, phase 2, he has E and F, the majority of the residential, and he has a requirement for approximately 30,000 square feet of commercial to be built. But once again, take a stop. In that original approval, phase 1, phase 2, had the CVS building needed to be poured by now. That's phase 1. Take a deep breath. It's not only not poured, it's being proposed to change it. Like, and I understand, maybe the changes are better looking, but really, get back to the approval. The approval says phase 1 has building B in it to be poured before you even get to F. F is in the ground. F is poured. Foundation's in the ground. If you look at the approved site plan, the construction order, building B is supposed to be poured and well underway. So back to your point, no. We have 60% of, and the only approved site we have, 60% of the commercials in phase 3, and using Mr. Bertram's words up at this podium on 8/18, it may not come. So once again, I'm referring to the entire mixed-use development as a whole. I believe we need to tighten up our regs. Unless you guys can look me in the eye and come up with a scenario that I'm wrong, there is no scenario that anybody can tell me tonight that we'd want to be in with almost all the residential, very little commercial, ever want to be in that boat as a community. We didn't adopt these. The most we've ever allowed in any zone was 4 apartments under a conversion. This is 240. But I don't want to go on all night. Unless somebody has something else, I'm going to go just touch base on the last one, the historic portion of it.
Yep.
Okay. And I apologize, I've been up here this long. So the historic, once again, and I already talked to it about Dan's memo, I believe the ratio is important. I believe moving forward it's going to benefit the town and we're going to get better outcomes. Maybe they're not going to be as ambitious, but I can tell you one thing. I bet they get completed. And what's more important? A project that somebody can stand up here at this microphone and say they have the ability to complete it, or have a big dream and put us in a very, very difficult spot. Well, I don't know about you guys, I'd rather have the completed project being presented. We move forward, we get what we want as a community, and it can always be expanded on. Once these start, they can always be expanded on. So I think that's the most important thing. So what I'll do is I'll step aside. I believe there's somebody here to speak in reference to the historic portion of this, and then I'll come back up and field any questions. Thank you, guys, and I apologize.
Yes, would someone else like to speak from the public? Okay, Dan, we'll get to you.
I'm going to time out a few times, so whenever you want to put me out.
I guess we will have the 5-minute rule in place here, unfortunately.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, very good. Good evening. I'm Bob McDougall of Kristen Drive. I'm a trustee of the Portland Historical Society, and on behalf of the society, I'd like to make the following statement about application 2315. The mission of the Portland Historical Society is to function as the custodian of Portland's legacy in perpetuity. To that end, we support changes to regulations which encourage, promote, support, and require the protection, preservation, or restoration of the town's historic resources, as enumerated in the town's Plan of Conservation and Development through the Historic Resource Inventory. The amendment to Section 9.17.1 to add a maximum number of 16 residential units per historic building restored strengthens the regulations by establishing a ratio between the number of residential units and the number of historic buildings being restored, while creating an incentive for developers to include more historic buildings in their plans. This is consistent with the current agreement for the Brainerd Place development and will set a precedent that can consistently be applied to future development in town, avoiding future wheeling and dealing that could erode or our limited stock of historic resources. The amendment to Section 9.17.5.m.2 to remove text stating, "For good cause shown in following public hearing, the developer may secure relief from this requirement as a modification to the approved plan, provided that the commission is satisfied that the conditions beyond the control of the developer will prevent the execution of the schedule of the development are approved. We do not believe that allowing relief to the developer at the expense of our historic resources is reasonable or prudent. We believe that the developer should be required to adhere to their schedule of development as approved in regards to the restoration of the historic buildings. These buildings are valued resources, and allowing delays in their restoration increases both the work to restore them and the risk that significant elements may be damaged or lost due to neglect. In summary, we support these amendments to the regulations as they improve the protections of our historic resources, and they provide incentives to protect, preserve, and save more buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we'll give Dan a chance before you come up. Oh, well, you, yeah. Did you want to speak, Dan?
Good evening, everybody. Dan Bertram, 69 Marlborough Street. So a few things. I think that it's hard for me to be less than direct, and so I'll apologize in advance for being direct, I guess. A couple things said a few minutes ago, somehow that the other three buildings were lost, the historic buildings. When I came to town, I mean, I have the origin story on a lot of these things because we were negotiating with Susan Bransfield, we were negotiating with Mary Dickerson, we were negotiating with Steve Cecil, right, doing the VCI report. We were negotiating with Carrie. And so, suburban apartment development, there's a general rule of thumb, 220 to 240. That is something I said to say, what is the minimum that we would need to step off and take on a project here? And it has to do with the amount of units that you can have in a market you're not already in and have an on-site staff person who can run it. If it's too small, you don't have that opportunity for the property to support the staff you might need to independently run a property. So it's an institutional investment metric for suburbs. So that's a little bit the 240 origin. The three historic buildings, even in the VCI report, were dropped immediately. All the studies that were done and all the options that were presented to the town involved three historic building preservations. The sewer plant situation hasn't snuck up on anybody. If you look at the Public Works minutes going back the last few years, it's right in there. Ben did not discover this and bring it to light, and it's just a matter of looking at it. It is an issue, an operating cost issue, and typically municipalities try to address that through grant list growth and other revenues to pay for their operating expenses. Of course, grant monies and things like that get applied for and are usually granted. So I don't think that that will be a problem to pursue. But it's certainly not an issue that's come up recently or out of nowhere. I have to say that investing is psychological, and so the discretion is just so important. I said it last time, I don't want to repeat myself, because that's something I sit in a lot of meetings and listen to people do, so I really try not to do that myself. But I usually am listening to someone whose background, at least when it's getting into this level of critique, there's some investment in process or professionals or something else. And I've tried to research Ben's approach, and he's here alone. It's chicken scratch written into the existing regs upon submission. Mr. Law is not here representing and kind of acting as a sounding board. So there's a fair bit of kind of, like, I don't really, if you look at the application for number 2, I think it's indecipherable. And so we're finding our way to what it may mean. I've already said on number 1, it didn't matter to me. I do think that if we're looking at multifamily development in terms of accretive taxation, right, unit mixing is a way of doing that, and therefore, you know, we proposed a 70-30 mix, and doing a 70-30 mix is fine. So the last thing is just, again, that discretion is something. I do these projects. Susan drove down to Brookfield and went through one of them before we ever did anything. I don't know who's gone and looked at this. I've looked into Ben's stuff, and I can't say that he spends a lot of money on architects either. I mean, I have things from the assessor's pictures, and when I look at the scale of it, it's hard. And I look at a site on Sage Hollow Road and Cornwall Street that looks like a material processing thing in a residential zone that, hell, I went by it today and it had a loader on it and a pile of topsoil. I don't know why we're taking guidance when all these other professionals were involved. The VCI report was an extensive process. There were a lot of people involved. I'm just imploring, I'm 30 seconds, okay. I'm imploring you to consider, probably the single most important thing I can say is the discretion mattered a lot to me. If I foresaw sort of the conflict of working things out, I wouldn't have stepped off the curb. My whole proposal that we'll be talking about next week, again, revolves around delivering 50,000 square feet of commercial. It's not about not doing it. I spent 3 hours today on Art Jarvis alone. I think I'm this close to figuring something out interesting there, but I'm out of time. So I'll leave you with that cliffhanger, I guess. But thank you for listening.
Thank you. Someone else like to speak for the first time tonight? Okay.
All right, so, well, I'm glad you looked into some of my properties, Dan. One thing you'll notice, I say what I do and I do what I say, and I'm glad you drove by. And the irony is the person that was one of the complainers at the time, sitting right behind you over there on the Sage Hollow project. And I still have a valid permit to this day. So, not sure what you meant by that. My kids like it as a sledding hill, so I've decided to slow down on the building of the house at this point, but I've done everything I said I was gonna do. I even gave the town the intersection. They didn't own it. I gave it to them as part of my approval. I do a lot of things. So if you're gonna compare yourself to me, I think the part that you struggle with, and one of the reasons that you find it hard to believe that I would just stand up here without experts, is because I love this town, and I know that's probably hard to believe And that's probably the reason you fired me, and I would have too. I let him know that I was working on a site through Ryan Curley, and I think that's comical that it took him long enough to figure that out. But if anybody ever had any question of my integrity or my morals, or where I stand in this community, I think what Mr. Bertram just did speaks volumes, and I kind of appreciate it, to be honest with you. I hope you can see that.
I don't want to interrupt you too much,
Yeah,
Ben,
yeah.
but I know there's a little back and forth right now that has
Well,
nothing to truly
okay.
really do with the text amendment, so I would say ask
Yes, so-
all parties to just please
So-
concentrate on the.
Thank you, I'll get back on topic.
Okay.
So Dan mentioned the 220 to 240 was the minimum that would work, where our regulations came from that number, because that'll be relevant actually in your next meeting. That'll be more important. And part of that was the critical mass needed to come up with enough commercial and enough residential. And if anybody, including Mr. Bertram, stands up here and tells you otherwise, well, then we need to ask him, why would you ever propose something that wouldn't work or didn't have the critical mass needed to start the project? So once again, back to my point of the waiver, there's absolutely no reason to have that. That's a perfect example of just do the project the way it is intended, and more importantly, my ratio with the historic preservation sets a bar where everybody understands what they're getting. And I was glad to hear we can agree on the 70-30. I think I heard him say that there was no major issue there. And then he incorrectly said the Public Works minute. We don't have any Public Works minutes, so I didn't miss it, Dan. What you meant to say was the Water and Sewer Commission, and I didn't miss it. So once again, not necessarily accurate, but I just want to point that out for clarification purposes, and that's it. We'll move on.
Yep.
So I would ask you guys to really, you're either voting tonight on these, or you're going to be making a decision shortly on the next proposed changes. But keep in mind, my 3 changes are independent of his 2. All 5 can be approved. There are no conflicts with them. I would ask this commission before if you guys have any questions for me, please, I'm standing here, run it by me. Everything I'm proposing helps this town, and I hope you guys truly, truly understand where we're at with our mixed-use regs and where we could end up as a community if we don't work on these changes.
Okay, any questions for Ben before we let him go? Okay. All right, thank you. Anybody else like to speak tonight?
Get ready.
Text
Get ready,
amendment
get
related,
ready.
right? Okay.
If he starts talking about it.
Well, actually, it'll be 10 seconds, so I just want to say this. I'm alluding to speaking from a core skill set versus not. I'm not going after Ben more directly than that. I'm just saying I haven't seen the investment in like projects that allows the pontification or gives them the grounding to throw bombs. And so we're doing our best to finish this job, and we have a history of doing large jobs and impacting communities in a materially positive way, and we look forward to seeing you next week. So thank you. And I won't come up again. That's what he says.
Text amendment related, right?
I think this will be the last one. What I also wanted to say is, I have no issue with Dan. Actually, moving forward, if you guys approve, don't approve it, we all have to work together as a community. We're gonna get there at the end of the day.
I know.
See ya. I might not come back.
Last call for a member of the public to speak. Anyone we haven't heard from yet tonight? Okay? Commission members? Questions, comments at this point?
Well, I think we should have a conversation at least about what changes we want to consider approving and putting into an motion. Because, I mean, the way I'm looking at it, I might vote for one, but I wouldn't vote for all 3.
My recommendation, Rob, would be that we close the public hearing tonight, and we can continue our discussion at our next meeting. our debate. Give us time to think about it.
Next regular meeting.
Next regular meeting. We would plan to have a discussion amongst ourselves at part of that meeting, and then presumably have a vote.
So we're not all ready to vote, the public hearing would be closed. then,
Public
we
hearing would be
discuss it.
closed, right.
Right.
It would
You
just be
you
a
still have
discussion
time,
amongst-
you don't have to make a decision tonight, you have time, 65 days to make a decision after a public hearing is closed. So,
Nobody else can hear you. No, into the mic, man. Come on.
At one point, Carrie had mentioned it would be okay to change that one word, so I would recommend when you do decide.
Restored.
What's that?
You have restored.
No, I think Carrie was more to the point, historic resource. There, thank you, Rob. That was the one word, Carrie thought that was within the,
I thought the variance was between preserve or restore.
oh, I
So
thought in the
that's-
first meeting.
So significant, it's in the VCI report and in our regs right now, it's preservation of significant historic resource.
Resource.
You have it listed as restore. I think we need
You
clarity.
guys thought it should be the same language, and I
Yes.
said yes.
Preserved rather than building restored.
Yes.
Right. Resource preserved.
Yes,
So-
yes.
So
yes.
I will make
just-
it,
for
I'll
clarification.
make a note of that.
Yes.
And then if the commission
When-
decides to do that,
right,
we'll do
'cause if
that.
close the public hearing, I can't get back up. That was the one thing I thought Carrie had a good point.
And I just, clarification that if you close the public hearing, then I can no longer speak.
Correct.
No, you
Or
can
discuss.
deliberate with the group.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
I can?
Yeah.
No, during the meeting, you have a right to deliberate publicly during a public meeting.
But once
But
the
if-
public hearing is closed.
Yes, but you can talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
Just can't vote.
right.
Just
I can't vote. We can't.
No,
vote.
you,
Unless
no,
you're
no, no.
unless you're
Okay, two different
seated.
things. Public hearing gets closed. That means you can no longer receive information from the outside world unless it's staff. Okay? And even from staff, it can be to answer a question, but it can't be like a whole new can of worms. Okay? You close the public hearing, and then you go into deliberations when you choose to do so, and you have, again, 65 days to make a decision. But when you go into deliberations, you have the right to talk.
But she's an alternate.
Oh, an alternate.
That's what-
Yeah.
That's what she
Yeah.
meant, sorry.
I am sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay.
You're getting me confused.
Yeah, so the five
I apologize.
seated,
Yes.
seated members, so if you can be an alternate, you have to be seated.
Right,
So,
right.
you know, not to bring up other applications, but we had a alternate seated for another application. That alternate would be allowed to speak. So yeah, it's just the five seated members.
But you're not supposed to be part of the deliberations anyway. So it's right for you to participate in the public hearing and ask questions,
Right,
but when it comes to deliberation,
right.
you're not supposed to be part of the deliberations.
Okay.
Because then you have an illegally constituted board, because you have too many people.
Okay.
Thank you for that
I'm
question,
sorry, if I
Caroline.
had known
Thank
you.
you for the clarification.
Probably more confused, but it's cool.
I
No, no, I
apologize.
got it now.
Okay, did you have questions that you
No,
wanted?
but
Okay.
I'm just afraid I will once you start, but yeah.
It's out of your hands at that point.
So once a public hearing is closed, that means you're in deliberation.
Well, I understood that one of the proposals was to table this
Right.
until the next. Right.
But we would need to,
Well,
we would need to
Pretty much
close.
after the public hearing closes.
That's the next step.
Alternates
Right.
they're not going to participate
clear.
Right.
at that point.
Yes, that is the next step, is deliberation and then a decision.
So the alternates can say something, they can state their opinions now if they have them before we close the
Before it
public
closes, yeah.
hearing.
I would loosely say yes.
Yeah.
I really think you're
Mm-mm.
better off just leaving the deliberations to the seated
Okay.
persons.
Well, not really interested in dragging this out any much longer than we need to, so I'd rather just close the public hearing.
Yep.
Talk about it at the next regular meeting and get through this.
Sounds like a capital idea. So then, may I have a motion to close the public hearing for application 2315?
So moved.
And a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Okay, the public hearing for 2315 is now closed. So we will have this on our schedule for our next regularly scheduled meeting for deliberation. Okay?
So what's gonna be on that, what's gonna be on that calendar?
It's gonna be the amendment 2316, right?
No, so
that's
it'll be,
special.
it'll be 220 Isinglass, 23-12, and it'll be this one.
Yep.
Well, and depending on what happens next Thursday,
Yeah.
you may close that public hearing and decide you want to discuss that at the next meeting. It's gonna be up to you. It'll be a late night. Look at you're laughing. It's gonna be a late night, you're laughing.
Okay, then we will move on
You don't
with
need any
tonight's
more raisins.
business.
No, go home, enjoy your life.
Go have my dinner, right?
I hear you, oh
Okay.
yeah. Mickey D's is gonna feel good.
We have to wrap up the meeting here, so we'll move on then. New business, I see none. Old business, we'll discuss business and industrial zoning at a future date. Staff report,
No correspondence, no update.
okay. Just a reminder, our special meeting is a week from tonight at 6 PM
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock at the
at the high school.
high school, yep.
Okay. Public comment, any members of the public like to make a brief comment? Okay, seeing none, then may I, let's see, we need to approve the minutes from 5/2. Present at that meeting were myself, Victoria, Chantel, Rob, and Jen. More people were present, but those were the people seated. Seconded?
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Okay, the minutes are approved, and a motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, the meeting is adjourned.
So
Boy, Bob.